Nice to see a good turnout, and I start the meeting off with a fire warning from Patrick Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we don't have any fire tests scheduled, so if the fire alarm does sound, please can you leave by the nearest exit, which is here and behind you. Please don't use the lifts, and please congregate in the car park at the front of the building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutions, please, Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Christine Ambrose-Smith, Councillor Mark Goldsack, Councillor James Lay and Councillor Christine Whelan. Councillor Chika Akinwale is substituting for Councillor Whelan, Councillor Julia Huffer is substituting for Councillor Ambrose-Smith, and Councillor Lucius Vellacourt is substituting for Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you very much. Members, have any of you got any declarations you want to make? No? Okay. Members of the public, some of you may not have been here before, so I'd like to personally say welcome to you. You can stay as long as you like and as little as you like. We would normally, and I don't know how it's going to work out today, we would normally have a comfort break at about 2 hours, or what it is. And for your information, if you go out of those doors there and turn left, you'll find a toilet. And if you go out of that door and go straight on, you'll find a toilet there. Please help yourself as and when you want. Now, you may be looking at this panel in front of you and thinking, what on earth do they all do? Well, my name's Bill Hunt, I'm the chairman. I'm assisted this afternoon with Councillor Goodall as Vice Chairman, and the other members are all elected members along this side. They will be listening to the proceedings, and at the end of the agenda item they will be making the decisions as to whether or not there's a valid application. Over here are officers, legal advisors and planning officers who will advise the members on what's going on. I would ask you, if you are a speaker, you will be asked questions by members. What I would ask you to do is not treat that session as another 5 minutes to put your point of view forward. There'll be a straight questions. Do you think this or do you not think that? Because it's not another opportunity to get your case over. There's also, we've had some busy sessions here, and we didn't cover a performance review on our last meeting, which was only a week ago. We will be dealing with that at the end of this meeting. So we now move on to item number 4, which is land at High Flyer Farm, Ely. Can we have the officer presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The item before members this afternoon is a reserved matters application following the granting of outline permission 11/01077/ESO. The proposal is for the matters of layout, scale, appearance, access and landscaping for 536 dwellings. A detailed report setting out officer considerations has been published ahead of this meeting for members' consideration, and all plans and documents associated with the application have been made available throughout the course of the application. The purpose of this presentation is to briefly run through the main considerations following the site visit this morning in order to aid members' discussions. In terms of the site location, the application site measures 44.7 hectares or 110.4 acres and is located to the north of the city of Ely. It comprises mostly arable farmland with some trees and hedgerows interspersed. The site is bounded to the west by Lynn Road, to the south by the existing built form of Ely, and to the north and east by further areas of the allocation site and the railway. A public right-of-way, footpath 10, runs through part of the site, and there is a small reservoir to the north. The application, as I've mentioned, seeks consent for the reserved matters of access, layout, scale, appearance and landscaping for 536 dwellings, following the outline permission granted in 2015, the decision notice for which is located in Appendix 2 of my report, and also the Section 106 agreement. It should be noted that the main spine road running through the site, linking to the existing permitted development to the south and to Lynn Road to the northwest, has been approved under a separate reserved matters application. The proposal includes affordable housing, self-build plots in accordance with the Section 106. The proposal will also deliver open spaces, an extension to the country park, play areas, allotments and a sports pitch. So the main considerations are the principle of development, the market housing mix, the affordable housing, open space, residential amenity, design, character and density, highways, access and movement, biodiversity and trees, and flood risk and drainage. In terms of the principle of development, the application site is allocated in the local plan under policy Ely 1. The principle of development in this location has been established through the allocation of the site and the granting of the outline application. The outline permission conditioned that reserved matters applications were to be made within 15 years of the grant of permission. The reserved matters application has been made within that timescale, and therefore the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the housing mix, housing density and affordable housing, it delivers 536 dwellings with an appropriate housing mix. 188 dwellings will be delivered as affordable housing, which equates to 35% delivery in accordance with the Section 106. This will be split with 70% being shared ownership and 30% being rented. The proposal will also deliver 5% self-build properties in accordance with the Section 106, and an acceptable average density across the site is proposed. 23% of dwellings will be constructed to Part M42 of the building regulations. In terms of open space across the site, the proposal includes 25.5 hectares of open spaces, which is roughly 57% of the site area. This includes extensions to the country park, green corridors linking open spaces and creating accessibility across the site. A large area for allotments is located to the western boundary of the site, and there are 3 equipped play areas proposed, which are indicated on the above plan with red stars. There is play on the way equipment also proposed within green corridors. The proposals are considered to meet the requirements of the outline permission and are in line with the parameter plans that were agreed at the time. In terms of residential amenity, the proposed development is generally well separated from existing development by existing landscaping such as trees and hedgerows, road infrastructure and good separation distances. While the proposed development will introduce new relationships between dwellings, it should be noted that this site is part of an allocation within the local plan for housing and already benefits from an extant outline planning permission. Acceptable separation distances are considered to prevent significantly detrimental impacts on residential amenity, with things such as overlooking, overbearing and overshadowing. In terms of visual amenity, the proposal includes 3 main character areas for the developed areas of the site and a further character area relating to the open space provision to the east. There are 3 separate house type packs which include a variety of dwelling designs and styles, and variations of materials and architectural detailing are employed across the site to provide visual interest to street scenes. Landscaping has been employed to create tree-lined streets and open spaces with visual interest. The Council has engaged with an urban designer throughout the course of the application. Following input into the design of the scheme, amendments have been sought to address matters such as layout, design of dwellings and landscaping. The urban designer has commented that the proposed development has clearly evolved through a detailed and iterative design process, and overall the scheme now presents a significantly improved response to the approved parameter plans, the North Ely SPD and the character areas design code. The proposals demonstrate a good understanding of strategic placemaking aspirations for this part of Ely and successfully incorporate many of the key urban design principles established through the outline consent and subsequent coding work. Whilst the direction of travel is positive and the scheme is considered acceptable in broad design terms, there remain several areas where the proposals fall short of the design code's ambitions and where further refinement would improve the quality and legibility and distinctiveness of the development. Further refinements have been requested but haven't been forthcoming. However, on balance, the proposal is considered to create an attractive development as a whole, and conditions are recommended to ensure that the scheme delivers good quality in terms of boundary treatments, the appearance of pumping stations or substations, and external materials. Moving on to highways, the main spine road through the site is already consented. The proposals would join onto this spine road in order to deliver the parcels of development. Across the site, dwellings are generally served by 2 external parking spaces, with 1-bedroom dwellings having 1. 101 visitor parking spaces are delivered across the site, and we've had significant input from the local highways authority, who've raised no objections to the proposals following amendments. They have noted that the land dedication plans that have been submitted identify streets that may be offered for dedication as public highway, and that it has been indicated that strategic paths between parcels may similarly be offered for adoption. They do note that the network of strategic paths would be deliverable to an adoptable standard, and that the public rights of way diversion plan includes information that these strategic paths will be 3-metre wide asphalt routes with lighting columns. The Local Highways Authority advised that the land dedication plan should not be approved plans as part of any grant of planning permission, as the final extent of any such dedication remains a matter for the Local Highways Authority to determine. We've also consulted with the Cambridgeshire County Council Definitive Map team regarding the public rights of way, and they've advised that they're satisfied with the proposed public footpath diversion and specification, and therefore there's no objection raised to those proposals. In terms of ecology and trees, while biodiversity net gain is not mandatory in this case, the applicant has decided to use the mandatory approach to address local and national policy requirements for providing ecological enhancements on the site and a measurable net gain. So our senior ecologist has noted that there have been changes to the biodiversity net gain standards, and therefore dispute the percentage gains set out in the biodiversity net gain report. However, they calculate that there would be a 6% gain in area habitats, but there would be a loss in watercourse habitat. And while such loss is regrettable, the application is not subject to mandatory BNG, and therefore we must consider the 6% net gain in area habitats to be acceptable, and they've raised no objection on that basis. We've also had advice from the Council's Trees Officer, who's requested conditions to ensure compliance with the arboricultural method statement and impact assessment in order to ensure that the trees are not impacted during construction. They note that the landscape and ecological maintenance plan is of sufficient detail, that the scheme should be established successfully if the recommendations are complied with. Moving on to flood risk and drainage, conditions 21 and 22 of the outline planning permission required the submission of detailed foul and water surface drainage, detailed foul and surface water drainage design as part of the reserved matters application. Those conditions require reserved matters to demonstrate that they comply with the site-wide drainage details secured by conditions 8 and 9 of the outline planning permission. The information submitted has been reviewed by the Internal Drainage Board, Anglian Water, the Environment Agency and the Lead Local Flood Authority. There are no outstanding objections to the proposals, and the compliance with the information submitted is covered by the wording of conditions 21 and 22 of the outline permission. On balance, the proposed development would deliver part of an allocated site within the local plan and makes a significant contribution to the district's housing supply and affordable housing. The proposed development is considered to be broadly in line with the fundamental aims of the design code and delivers the requirements of the outline consent. Consultees have responded on drainage, highways, ecology and landscaping matters and have raised no objection. While the scheme has some weaknesses in terms of aspects of design and landscaping, these are not considered to warrant refusal of the application, and with the appropriate suggested conditions in Appendix 1 of my report, it's considered that the scheme complies with the development plan as a whole. So members are recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 of the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have our first objector, Tom Gilliam Webb. Would you please come up? You have 5 minutes to speak. Turn the microphone on. You've dropped a bit of paper. No, you've got some notes or something you've dropped. start when you wish.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me, everybody. Appreciate your time. I live on Redmond Close with my partner and my family, number 12, and my look at the overall development, obviously, is just mostly based on what's near to me. And the main thing that I have an objection to in the current layout scheme is the fact that in the arboricultural impact assessment, they've left off the root protected areas of 2 protected trees that are on our property. And the new arrangement places the driveway and parking space of the plots 380 to 383 within that root protected area, which I'm quite concerned about just for the health of my tree. It's already got the road, the pre-existing road, or the high flyer footpath running well over its roots. And that was, obviously that road was there before the tree had a tree protection order. But it's already, affected by that, and losing more of its kind of decent root area is going to cause significant issues for the tree, I believe. It's also concerning that we've recently built an extension, and when we were looking at building this extension, the rules were very strictly enforced on us that we weren't even allowed to put temporary building materials or anything within that root protected area. We couldn't put a single brick within about 10 metres of our tree, and yet this plan has shown a tarmacked and paved area within that same root protected area. So obviously that's a detriment to us because it's likely going to damage our tree in the long term, but also it just seems crazy because why would you want to put tarmac and paving over tree roots? It's almost guaranteed to fail at some point, in which case remedial work is going to further damage the tree. And any kind of paving that's actually worth having, anything that's going to be able to support a car, is going to need to be deep enough that it will guaranteed impact our roots. So yeah, that's a concern of mine, just that proximity. I do appreciate that as a whole, the scheme does seem sensible, but I think that it would be, it wouldn't be very sensible just to ignore these small details because it will impact people's lives, including ours. So there's other things as well. With that parking area, it looks like from previous plans, that whole block of houses that runs along next to the current high flyer footpath has been pulled south, and the area that was dedicated to the children's playground has been made smaller, with that driveway and car parking area directly bordering it, which I'm not sure if, again, how appropriate that is, having cars in that close proximity to a children's playground, both for the children's safety and also for the safety of the cars. I can imagine them getting damaged more frequently than cars elsewhere on the site. Also with that footpath, it's noted on the plans as being a footpath / cycle path, and currently it provides vehicular access for the high flyer cottages. I was wondering what's going to be happening there. Are cars still going to be driving down that footpath? Because it being the main pedestrian route for the entire site to town, into town, I can imagine that the footfall is going to be significantly increased, and I'm just not sure how appropriate it would be to be having cars driving up and down there, even if it is just the farmers' cars. Being a private road, they don't use the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that is used everywhere else in Ely. So yeah, it's just something to consider. But I would appreciate consideration being made to the fact that this plan has just completely disregarded the root protected area of a tree that we own. All right, I think that's me done. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Can you just stay where you are, please?
Of course, yeah.
Members, questions? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. Are you the only property that's affected by, that has trees that will be affected by this, or are there similar properties? It's difficult to know on the map
Well,
where you are actually.
I'd love to be able to tell you the answer to that, but I've just been looking at what's affecting me, selfishly possibly, but there's a lot to it. But the fact that our root protected area has been omitted from the arboricultural impact assessment does make me question whether or not that has happened elsewhere. And it would be, I feel like it would be surprising to find that this was the only instance where it had happened.
Well, it's something I should bring up then to the officer when we ask questions to the officer.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much. We're south of the cottages, so we're approximately halfway between the entrance to the private high flyer road and the water tower in the old RAF estate. So our back garden backs onto the high flyer path, which will hopefully become a cycle path and footpath, which I'm all for. And so directly behind us is the last block of houses. It's plots, I believe, 380 to 383, which are the ones directly north of the southernmost playground area that's been marked on the layout. Great. Okay. Thanks. So yeah, if you look, it does actually look like we are probably the property that has the closest building work to us. Us and our next door neighbour have are closest to the proposed development. No, you're welcome.
Councillor Trapp.
Sorry, I'm slightly at a loss to understand about this car vehicle.
Yes.
So there's a cycle path and a pedestrian path.
Yes.
Cars can go down. Is that what you're saying?
Well, currently it's a private road and it's used as access to the high flyer cottages. And until very recently, well, actually, I believe it probably still is the main access road to the high flyer farm. So we've been used to having tractors, HGVs, and all sorts of traffic up and down that road. But in the proposed development, it has very clearly specified that will be a cycleway and footpath. But I wasn't sure whether that is going to prohibit cars going to the high flyer cottages, or whether there's going to be other access provided for those cottages, because they will need something.
I shall ask the planning officer.
Okay.
Oh, that's going to be happening. Thank you very much.
That's great, thanks.
Sorry, members' questions? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And we now have a statement from David Bainbridge. I think you heard it's 5 minutes and you need to switch seat. You've done it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, councillors, officers, members of the public. My name is David Bainbridge. I'm a Chartered Town Planner at Savills and I provide planning advice through to the applicant team comprising David Wilson Homes, Barrett Homes and Redrow Homes. We're very grateful for your time this afternoon, and we hope you had a good site visit this morning. We're very grateful to your officers for a very full report, a very full pre-application and application process, where we have been taken to task on a number of environmental, technical and design matters, and one would say quite rightly as well. And your officers have explained that it's been an iterative process which has led to a proposed development which is considered to be sustainable development, which is considered on balance to be acceptable development. And what we really need, approaching 1 week to go until the 11th anniversary from the grant of this outline planning permission, is for you committee members please to support your officers in their positive recommendation. Because these three house builders who have placemaking at heart and have for some 17 years, I believe, received the 5-star highest rating from the Home Builders Federation in terms of the quality of their developments. They really want to crack on and deliver these new places, deliver these equipped children's play area, deliver the publicly accessible open space, the country park. I had prepared a speech, and you'll notice I'm not looking down at my papers. And I think the reason for that is because some of the questions which have come forward are very focused and targeted. We appreciate the neighbours' comments, which I'll come on to shortly and answer, but we appreciate, of course, members, that you'll be looking to your officers for some answers in respect of that also. What this really is about is delivery of this new homes and placemaking in the context of a national housing shortage and, depending how one looks at it, a particular need within your district. The proposed development is considered to comply with the site allocation in terms of Ely 1. It's proposed it complies with the National Planning Policy Framework as well. We have to comply with all of the planning conditions from the outline planning permission. They all remain, they're all stringent, they're proper and they are correct. And I believe there are some 20 planning conditions which your officers have recommended for you, members of the committee, to take into consideration going forward. We've reached agreement with your officers in respect to those planning conditions, and we fully intend to adhere to those planning conditions going forward. We would put in place, not just in terms of a strategy for stewardship of the publicly accessible open space, including the country park and equipped play areas, we'll put in place to ensure that there is ongoing, regular dialogue with your officers and with other stakeholders. We underwent a design review panel prior to submission of the application. We've gone through extensive pre-application engagement as well, and that also includes meetings that were held with the City of Ely Council. So we feel through that very fulsome process that we've arrived at a situation today where, of course, members of the committee, you have that positive recommendation in front of you. May I turn to the residents' comments in respect of a very specific part of the character area which is proposed and called The Ridge by Barrett Homes as part of the applicant team. Our understanding, I believe the resident mentioned that their property backs onto the driveway, which is used by pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles, albeit on a private use. It's not an adopted road per se, but it is part of the public right-of-way network. The intention is, of course, that occupiers, visitors of the cottages continue to have vehicular access to those cottages, conscious of time, members, so that wouldn't change. Our understanding is there is already a driveway, a hard surface driveway, between the rear of the property and the proposed new development. The trees have been assessed within the arboricultural impact assessment, and there is a specific recommendation which we're looking to follow, that there would be a watching brief by an arborist when it comes to the development. What tends to happen is that the British standard for arboricultural impact assessment wouldn't necessarily have a root protection area where there is already ground excavation and hard surface works between the position of the tree and where the proposed development is. And that is the current situation just now. So therefore, that's been fully assessed and taken into consideration in terms of the arboricultural impact assessment and also in terms of the detailed layout. So to conclude, again, we're very grateful to your officers for a very fulsome process and report. Conscious the red light's on. We'd be very grateful if members could go with your officer's recommendation, and I would welcome any questions. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your awareness about times. Appreciate it. Members. Councillor Akinwale.
I note that the plan obviously has got 3 play areas within the plan. It refers to ages 1 to 5, 1 to 7 plus, and then 2 to 12. Is there any provision for teenagers? Because I know from experience that even though it says 2 to 12-year-olds may find that play equipment a bit too immature for them. So what's your provision for teenagers in that area?
Yes, we have got a neighbourhood equipped area for play, so that could be appropriate for a range of ages. There's nothing specifically being asked for in terms of teenagers for the age of 13 to 19, for example, but there is a range across the 3 equipped areas. There's also the sports pitch provision. I appreciate that's different to an equipped play area per se, as well as the extensive country park. So the 3 areas have got a range, although we don't have a specific request for any equipment, if I can put it that way, for teenagers per se. But we are very keen to ensure that all equipped 3 play areas have inclusive play at the heart, with the detailed design which has been put forward found to be acceptable.
Thank you. 'Cause I know you mentioned basket swings, but that's the only thing I've seen in the actual report. What else are you providing in those play areas that are inclusive?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we've got basket swings. We've looked to make sure that there is sensory planting. We've looked to make sure that the levels, it is level 4 access, so for mums, fathers, carers, grandparents and what have you, can have level access, whether that's for buggies or indeed for wheelchair users. It will be a resin-bound surface treatment. So therefore, obviously, this would need maintenance going forward, and we've got a full detailed plan as to the areas of the site which are proposed to be offered for transfer through to you as in the District Council, and more broadly. And so overall, the areas would be wheelchair accessible, as well as the specific items of play. Forgive me, I can't recall every single item of play across the 3 areas, but we do seem to be content that we've, the officers are content with the range of the play area, and that inclusive play would be secured. I believe it might be paragraph 57 within the officers' report. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, and the resident mentioned in regards to one of the play areas being reduced in size and in the closeness of the play area to the cars. Can you comment on that comment from the resident, please?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. All 3 play areas meet and in part exceed the minimum requirements for the play area, particularly the activity area. And what we have here, of course, is a situation whereby it's been strategically planned. So the equipped play areas, and in particular, one might say the most southern one, which, as I say, is within the ridge character area, that is a sufficient area both in terms of the activity of the play and separation distances to existing properties. We're always very conscious with our specialists, landscape architects, and also play specialists, which we have within the wider team. As you'd imagine, there's an absolutely huge team which is behind this proposal. We only have a fraction of it here today, but they've looked to ensure that residential amenity standards, landscape visual standards, and inclusive play is at the heart of what we have designed. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, in regards to basically car parking spaces, you mentioned 101 car parking spaces, which equates to 1 to 5.3 dwellings. Com 8 says 1 to 4 units. Can you confirm as to why you're going for 1 to 5.3 units?
I believe the officers cover this off in the report, and in particular, it might be paragraph 91. We felt in consideration of the existing phase, so the phase 1, if we refer to it by Redrow Homes, and of course Redrow Homes are part of the applicant team, we felt it was an appropriate standard to get to 1 visitor space per 5.3 overall as an average. And the reason being is that in discussions with the planning officers and the highways development management officers, the provision of 1 to 4, we believe, is an up to number. So that gives a bit of scope. But it's often interesting, isn't it, when it comes to planning policy and planning guidance and what have you, when it comes to the sharp end consideration as to the interpretation of that. But we believe at this point in time it's a very appropriate design response It's not an under provision, and your officers, of course, have been very careful and deliberate in not describing it as an under provision. It is, in fact, an appropriate provision in the context of an up to standard. We are within that up to standard. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more question, so I forgot to ask this. In regards to your units, how many of your units have wet rooms in the units? I know you have quite a number of, obviously, quite a number of units you're building. Which houses have wet rooms inside?
Chair, that's a very specific question. Would you allow me the liberty of looking to my clients to see whether they could confirm, or would you like me just to attempt an answer?
I think you might as well give a full answer. You've already gone down that route, despite me asking that the answers were yes and no.
Oh.
But however, this is a big application, and if you feel you need to have more time, you may do.
Chair, if I may just turn around and look at my client and see whether we're able to answer that, because it's such a specific question across this scale of development. But I don't know whether, if you wish, Chair, we could obviously confirm in terms of the numbers.
No, the people to satisfy are the members here. They're
Of
asking
course.
questions.
Of course.
And if Councillor would repeat your question, and then let's call it a day. But repeat your question.
So basically, the question was, how many houses being built have wet rooms inside?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I'm just checking our notes because my client has very helpfully mentioned that we have, of course, a provision of what's referred to under the building regulations as M42 provision, and they will have the wet rooms within them. That is category 2. I believe it's mentioned under paragraph 54. It exceeds the minimum requirement of 20% is the minimum requirement, where 23%, which will be category M42, which would allow for that wet room provision to be within those. Forgive me, I haven't written down the actual number, but it'll be 23% as defined within paragraph 54.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go on Councillor Vellicott.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I first start by complimenting on the level of affordable housing that you've put into the provision? I'm impressed with that, and we sit in front of a lot of applicants who haven't done that. I would like to explore two areas briefly. The first is in terms of landscaping. The officer report notes that although the landscaping is deemed acceptable, there's possibly additional areas of planting. Have you taken that into consideration, and will you bear that in mind during the construction?
Councillor, I'm very conscious of the Chair's direction, so I will say yes.
A very wise man. The second area I would like to explore is the loss of watercourse habitat. I recognise that the outline permission was granted before the introduction of mandatory BNG. However, I'm still concerned that there are regulations in the national framework to do with habitat loss. 26% loss of watercourse habitat is significant. What will you do to minimise it, and are you confident that you can minimise it?
Councillor, yes, we're confident that we can look to minimise that and improve upon it, as your officers have said, there is a bit of dispute there. We could, to be perfectly blunt, have not gone through the latest version of the statutory metric, which is a national requirement. We could have gone through an old metric, which arguably is a previous version, which is not to the same current standards. We've chosen to go bang up to date in terms of current standards. That's a result, but we'll do all we possibly can under the conditions for the planting to achieve a betterment of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I just seem to see the name Trapp quite a few times. Could we, away we go, Councillor Trapp.
Oh, I thought Councillor Kilbert was first. A couple of three questions. I sort of got the impression that you're saying that there's going to be a different access to the cottages. Is this right? I mean, is it being built or in the plans?
No, thank you, Councillor. No different access. So it's the existing route would be used for vehicles for those occupiers, visitors. Same route. We're not looking to take that access away from them. So it'll be existing route.
But that will then be shared with pedestrians and cyclists?
As it currently is, Councillor, yes, absolutely, yes.
Thank you. The previous speaker also mentioned about the squeezing of the play area. Is that a pity that it's being squeezed a little bit, you know?
I think
areas are very important.
Yes, absolutely, and placemaking is so important to us as organisations. We don't feel we've squeezed it. it certainly meets the minimum and I would actually say exceeds in part. So therefore we don't feel it's squeezed, and we're absolutely certain your officers would have held our feet to the fire if they felt it had been squeezed and was substandard, which it's not. Thank you.
All right, and the third question is the M42, the lifetime living. Is that over the market and social housing, or just one of those areas?
Thank you, Councillor. Just the affordable homes. Just the affordable.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question, and it's actually probably not, well, it's not what we're considering today, but it's a hobby horse of mine. And I really just wanted to get, if you're able to, your understanding, because under the Section 106 agreement, we've got the primary school and the preschool and the local centre, the shops. What's envisaged as to how far down the build programme for those three builders that's going to come in? Because with 536 dwellings, if we haven't got a primary school in place, then we are, from a sustainability point of view, we are going to have lots of problems. So I just wonder what's envisaged within the plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we're still in discussions with officers of your authority as in the District Council and also the County Council regarding the need for the primary school. We don't have a definitive date yet, but we'll continue those discussions and look to refine that strategy as to when that facility could come forward. Of course, 536 homes is quite a number of homes to be delivered, especially what's in a current challenging market in terms of the rates of sales of homes going forward, but my clients are very much in almost weekly contact, both in respect of the education provision and also the local centre. There's a commercial dynamic in terms of bringing forward the local centre, where typically you'd have a specialist developer who would come forward and deliver that, and once you have a build-up in terms of occupiers locally and the link road is open, then that would come forward. What is absolutely crucial, I would say, for this placemaking is to grant reserve matters approval for these new homes. They will come forward as part of the development with the spine road, the linking road. That could then be open, and then you'd have the bus service using that spine stroke linking road, and therefore you'd have that real activity and new community coming forward, which would mean we'd see delivery overall. Thank you.
Councillor Colbert.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to make sure that I'd got it absolutely clear about this gentleman's tree. So the existing private road is not going to be disturbed. The only works that you're carrying out will be on the opposite side of the road where the tree is, yeah?
That's correct, Councillor.
Thank you. That's all I wanted. The other half of it you've already answered. Thank you.
I've come to the end of the list of questions from members to Speaker. Anybody else, members, want to ask questions? No? Thank you very much indeed. And we now go on to comments by officers, and I don't know which officer wants to take this up.
Thank you, Chair. Just to address the two main points raised by the neighbour, thank you for bringing those up. We do have the trees officers here to help answer that. So in terms of the plots 380 to 383.
Yep, the presence of the existing driveway acts as a type of route barrier, so we've restricted the route ingress towards the site anyway, but the size of the trees as well means that any potential route protection area would only just reach the edge of the existing roadway. So with the roadway there and the size of the trees, it's not considered that the routes will have extended into where the area of development is.
Thank you. I believe we've, or Mr Bainbridge has answered the question about the pedestrian walking route and private vehicles, but we've also got James Stringer, who's come along from the Local Highways Authority to help answer any questions on highways matters. So I don't know whether you want to just touch on that as well, James.
Thank you, Catherine. Short answer is no. I think it was probably covered, but if you do have any questions about it... Do you
mind if I just...
Yeah.
I've got a member a member of the public who's already spoken in your time. Have you got something you want to ask? It is just one sentence.
Just wanted to comment on the size of the root protected area. So I believe it's meant to be, the regulation is 12 times diameter of
I think the tree issue has been raised quite comprehensively, and the tree officer is no doubt making notes about what's been said. But I would urge you to understand that you've had the time for your speaking, and we're now moving on. Thank you. Now I interrupted you, and I'm sorry about that.
Not a problem, Chair. I don't have anything to add other than what the applicant said about the track down to Kings Avenue, but if you do have any further questions, obviously, of course, I can answer them.
Can you clarify that a bit?
Yeah, this is in relation to the vehicular access up to the high flyer cottages and maintenance access actually to the water tower as well. That will remain, that track remains untouched by this application.
Well, I rather assumed it would be, and it's only common sense that it should be. Thank you. Thank you. We now have questions from members for officers.
I'll ask a question.
It's not necessary to feel neglected if you've only had 4 questions to date.
I've had 5 actually, but you know, if you're counting. No, it's actually tease out this trees thing, because although the speaker did have a nice 5 minutes, or very, very well timed 5 minutes for his delivery, his latest calculation shows that actually the tree roots will be affected the other side of that cycle path or vehicle access. And having had a very stringent order to not put even a single brick when he was doing his extension, I don't know how long ago this was, that may have been not covered by BNG, of course, because it might have been a long time ago. I was wondering why we are sort of dancing around this, the fact that there's going to be that basically there's going to be a hard surface on the other side of that track, and therefore the tree on that side, almost half the tree roots, will be actually submerged under tarmac or hard standing.
Thank you. We are on questions to officers.
That is a question to officer.
Yeah.
That's a question.
Kevin is going to answer.
So the British standard gives a root diameter, root protection area worked out as 12 times the root diameter at 1.5 metres from ground level. That's a theoretical limit, and it works on a perfect circle. When you have existing structures or construction in the ground, it restricts those routes. So with this site, that driveway will have, there's going to be limited amount of moisture under there and limited air access. Tree roots need air and water to survive, so they don't progress beyond those structures. And with the former use of the land being farmland, it's even less likely there's roots that have extended to that extent.
Any more questions? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify in regards to at what point can members consider the concern around the lack of shops? I know obviously there's been approval in regards to the outline planning as well as Section 106, but at what point can we consider lack of shops as a concern?
Well, the shops are contained as part of the outline for the entire site. They are a separate parcel, so they're not contained as part of this reserved matter. So my advice to the Chica is that they shouldn't be considered as part of this application. They are something which are clearly needed, and we are, as officers, pushing for them to be delivered. But when you're determining this application, you should be determining it on its merits, and the provision of shops has been dealt with through the outline.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to debate. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say that when I looked at these papers and I looked at the officers' things that she put out for us in our committee room, how impressed I was that with a large, very large development, the amount of thought and care that has gone into design, I mean, large amounts of green open space, and and I haven't heard the word adequate used once. Not once have I heard the word adequate, which is my single biggest bugbear in any form of development where something is adequate. We want excellent for our residents. We don't want adequate. So I'm really happy that they have provided 3 open space or large amounts of open space. They've got a little football pitch for kids to kick a ball around, because there's nothing more irritating than kids trying to kick a ball against your wall. So they've got that. They've got 3 separate play areas. The extension to the country park. I think if you're going to build a development like this, this is as good as it can possibly get. So I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Is that support a proposal, or is it support?
It can be whatever you'd like it to be, Chair.
No,
If you
it's-
would like me to
no,
propose
it's
it,
your
I'm happy
decision.
I'm happy to propose it. If you would like to propose it, I will happily yield.
I'm asking you, would you...
I'm
you've
happy
had-
to propose, Chair, yes.
Okay. Councillor Colbert.
Thank you. Well, I'd be very happy to second the proposal. I found it jolly nice as well. The applicant mentioned one of my firm favourites, which is sensory provision in the play areas. So, yeah, I think it's very nice.
Okay, I've made a note of the fact that you've proposed and seconded, but we'll continue with the debate. Members.
No one? Want someone?
No, you're quite... I'm quite conscious of the fact you're here, Councillor.
Something I mentioned on the bus, not on the bus, but when we were looking at it, the play areas have been sort of put to the sides, not in central, but I'm not sure. It's very difficult to judge this kind of development from a distance, from seeing plans like this. I'm concerned about the urban designer saying that there are shortfalls, and perhaps I should have asked the planning officer what the shortfalls were in his opinion. I'm slightly concerned about this dual use of the pedestrian and cycle track by vehicles as well. And I'm not, I understand the trees officer's reply. It's difficult without quantitative measurement whether the tree roots have gone under the path or not. And might make it a very lopsided tree. I mean, it depends. It looks like any wind from the east is going to knock it over because the roots won't be there to sort of lever it. So I'm in 2 minds about this, and I'd like to hear further opinions.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment. As far as I'm aware, that track that goes down to Highflyer Farm has been there for vehicle movement for a couple of 100 years or so. In fact, I've driven down it many times, and I'm not that old, but nevertheless, it's been in use, and I think it's been there for, and I do believe a racehorse called Highflyer is buried at the farm, and it was a successful Newmarket horse racing 200 years ago. So it's part of our history, and of course vehicles can go up there, and at present there are not that many pedestrians going down that road, but of course there will be if this is given approval. I would also like to say that I have every confidence in the quality of our planning department, and I commend the gentleman who brought up the issue of a tree, because in a development of 500 plus houses, the tree is not too important. However, to the people who it affects, it is important, and it's down to us to make sure that the concerns about the trees are taken into account when there's actually bricks going on the plot and JCBs are digging. So I have confidence that the planning department will take notice of it. And as I say, as far as we're concerned, it may seem trivial, but it isn't, because it's your home. And I recommend I recommend my comments to the planning manager. Carry on now. We have Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I'm like you. No application comes to you sort of 100%. There's always little things that niggles that you don't like. I mean, I'm broadly in favour of it, but like you, I have concerns, as the gentleman's brought up, about the tree. So I think we've got to keep personally, we've got to keep a watching brief on that. And the other thing is, and I heard what the chap from Savile said, whose name I've forgotten, apologies, and what David Moran said about, I know officers are pushing around, I'm sorry to go on about this, the primary school and things like that, because I think it's so important. But I will be voting for this, but I just think we need to keep a watching brief, if not more, on the tree, and also continue to push the developers to get that vital bits of infrastructure in earlier rather than later. Thank you.
Any more comments in the debate section? Because if there isn't, we have a proposal from Councillor Huffer, it's been seconded by Councillor Colbert, to agree with the officer's recommendation and approve the application. So is there any reason why I'm not going to go to the vote? So will those who are in favour of the application please raise their hands?
9 votes in favour, Chair.
And were there any votes against?
None against.
Were there any abstentions?
One abstention.
Well, that is now approved, and if you were just coming to listen to that agenda item, then I'll close the meeting for a minute while you vacate if you wish. Okay, we now go on to Rachel, the officer, to make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Before I just go into the main considerations in the presentation, can I just draw members' attention to page 35, which is, 105. Oh, hang on, it's a different page now, is it? Where's it gone? Apologies, it's changed the pages since I've written this. So it's page 31, which is 101. There's 2 page numbers on there. So it's just to bring your attention to condition 6. Just with regards to Class EC III for the personal services, that should read 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, rather than the current Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So it's just to clarify that timing.
That includes Sunday then?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the application seeks full permission for the proposed change of use of the site to allow Class EA retail sale of goods, Class EB sale of food and hot drinks, Class EC II professional services, Class EC III personal services, Class ED indoor sport, recreational fitness, Class EE medical and health services, Class EGI offices, Class F1B, display of works of art, agricultural and sui generis, which is microbrewery, dog groomers, It also includes ancillary office storage and administration space, seasonal event space, and the resurfacing of the overflow car park, which is retrospective. This is just the location plan of the site. This slide illustrates the site layout, and this slide illustrates the car park plan, the overflow car park. Here is an aerial view of the site, and I've just selected a few of the units just to show the mezzanines in there as well. So the main considerations are the principle of development, residential amenity, highways, flood risk and drainage, landscape and biodiversity. The applicant has demonstrated that the existing permission is too restrictive and limiting the ability to secure tenants and ensure the long-term viability of the site. Importantly, no new buildings or external alterations are proposed as part of this application. The proposal seeks to optimise the use of the existing mezzanine floor space while maintaining the current retail floor space cap of 1,166 square metres, including mezzanine space. Leisure uses would be capped at 2,450 square metres, with conditions proposed at Appendix 1 of the report to control floor space and permitted uses. Should retail and leisure operators not be secured, the proposal allows flexibility for alternative non-retail and non-leisure uses with the approved floor space limits. The scheme also proposes greater flexibility in unit sizes, increasing the single large unit from 287 square metres to 425 square metres, and standard retail units from 185 square metres to 265 square metres. Greater flexibility is also proposed in relation to retail multiples, although these will still be limited to no more than 75% of the total floor space. The cafe and restaurant offer would continue to include locally sourced produce, including produce directly sourced from Harlock's Farm, in line with the existing permission. In addition, the resurfacing of the car park improves accessibility and operational efficiency. The submitted impact assessment concludes that the proposals would not adversely affect the nearby town centres of Ely, Soham and Littleport, and would instead help strengthen the site's role and profile as a visitor destination. The proposed extended hours of operation are not considered to result in an unacceptable impact on residential amenity. No additional external lighting is proposed, and the extended hours would not materially alter the site's existing lighting characteristics. Conditions are recommended to control the approved hours of operation, require compliance with the amplified noise mitigation plan and plant noise limits, and ensure the car park is closed to the public outside trading hours. No objections have been received from the Environmental Health Officer. The application is supported by a transport assessment and junction capacity assessment. While some future congestion and queuing at the A142 site access junction has been identified during peak PM periods, the transport team note that queuing would occur within the private land rather than on the public highway. Parking provision at the site is considered sufficient to accommodate the proposed uses, and illumination levels within the car park and access points would remain suitable for safe movement. No significant impacts on the surrounding highway network are anticipated as a result of the proposed extended trading hours. The County Council Transport Team has raised no objections to the application, subject to a condition requiring a travel plan for the site. Surface water arising from the development can be appropriately managed through the use of permeable paving, swales, filter strips and a detention basin. The lead local flood authority has raised no objections, subject to a condition requiring the surface water drainage scheme to be carried out in full accordance with the submitted details. The resurfacing of the overflow car park has resulted in some habitat loss since January 2020. To address this, conditions are recommended requiring a scheme of ecological enhancements to offset the habitat loss and provide additional features for wildlife alongside a soft landscaping scheme for the site. The proposal increases the flexibility within the rural retail village through a wider range of Class E, F and sui generis uses, revised unit sizes and mezzanine restrictions, extended trading hours, seasonal events, and the removal of restrictions on retail multiples without increasing approved retail floor space. The changes would improve tenant attraction, occupancy rates, and long-term viability, while supporting rural employment, economic growth, and visitor appeal without impacting the town centres of Ely, Littleport, and Soham. Seasonal events and broader leisure community uses would strengthen the site's role as a rural destination. Potential impacts relating to amenity, highways, drainage, noise, landscaping, biodiversity and lighting can be mitigated through planning conditions. Overall, the economic and operational benefits are considered to outweigh the limited impacts identified. It is therefore recommended to approve the application, subject to conditions at Appendix 1 of the Officer Report and the amended Condition 6 that I raised earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We haven't got any objectors. And so we have a speaker, Alistair Morby, with support from Victoria Morby and Richard Seamark. So there's 3 speakers. You're welcome to please come up to the speaking desk. You have 5 minutes, but it's up to you how you split it down. And I'd ask you to be as respectful as you can be on the 5-minute time limit and put the microphone on when you wish to speak. You're ready to go when you wish.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for your opportunity to speak to you today in support of the proposal. My family are local, multi-generational farmers. We've managed 1,500 acres in Stuntney Estate for many years. Traditionally, the estate has provided a wide range of crops, including potatoes, wheat, oilseed rape, and sugar beet. However, like many farming businesses, we recognise that agriculture alone could no longer provide sufficient financial security for the long-term future of the estate. We therefore look to diversify and create a substantial and sustainable new source of income that would support both the estate and the wider local economy. Benjard was born from that vision. From the onset, our aim has been to create a vibrant, retail-led, mixed-use village that offers quality, choice and convenience while complementing rather than competing with nearby town centres. We have always thought to provide a district visiting experience that attracts people to the area and supports the wider district. The development was entirely funded by our family, and since opening in June 2023, we've continued to own and actively manage the site, ensuring high standards are maintained and that Benjard remains a destination that we can all be proud of. As with many new enterprises, the first few years have provided a valuable lesson. While Benjard has attracted many successful businesses, we have also experienced challenges, particularly with small start-up tenants. Several businesses have unfortunately been unable to survive beyond their first few years, resulting in vacancy, financial losses and reduced confidence among both visitors and prospective occupiers. We remain fully committed to Benjard and its role as an important employment hub, providing jobs and opportunities for local people. We continue to invest heavily in marketing, events and activities that drive footfall and support our tenants. However, experience has shown that some of the restrictions attached to the original planning permission have limited our ability to respond quickly to changes and their market conditions. On several occasions, we've had to turn away high-quality businesses that would have strengthened the offer at Benjard that brought further investment to East Cambridgeshire. For the past year, we've worked closely and constructively with the planning officers to identify the changes needed to secure the long-term success of the development. Importantly, we are not proposing any significant physical expansion at Benjard. The appearance, the scale of the development will all remain largely unchanged. What we are seeking is greater flexibility to respond more effectively and efficiently to changing market demands, attract larger, high-quality retailers and businesses that can strengthen the overall offer, and make more efficient use of the existing floor space through the introduction of mezzanine levels where appropriate. These changes will help ensure Benjard remains vibrant, occupied, economically stable, protecting local jobs, encouraging further investment and securing the future of this important rural diversification project. Finally, I would like to thank the planning officers for their considerable time and attention they've given to this application. Their assessment has been thorough and constructive, and we're grateful for their support. We respectfully ask you to support our proposal. Approving will allow us to move forward immediately with prospective tenants, reducing vacancy levels and continuing to build a successful destination that benefits our existing business, local residents and the wider district. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You still have some time left. Is there anything the other two of you wish to say? Okay. Well, you've heard what's been said, but away you go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for what you brought forward. I think it's a brilliant idea what you're trying to do. This is just one question, really. Just in regards to the overflow car park, how do you plan to manage that during the peak times, like seasonal events, outdoor events? Do you have any plan in place to manage the overflow car park?
I think our current existing model is when we have an event, when it takes us above our allocated spaces, when we're going into there, like the beach and other events. Their marshalling is always on site. That's run through the event company. So for management of the car park, we plan to carry on the existing plan.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I might ask a few questions. You say about rural jobs, are these jobs associated with the companies themselves that are leasing your property, or are there's extra jobs there for servicing those companies, if you see what I mean?
Currently, there's about 50 created jobs we've made since 2023 when we've opened. We have had a peak of over 100, but with vacancies that have come arise, that also creates job losses. So what we're trying to do is making sure we're maximum vacancies are full, so that is contributing better into the employment for local community.
Another question. I noticed on the plans there's quite a bit of other buildings there outside the planning area. Is that housing or what is it? I mean, how are the neighbours going to be affected?
The neighbours are all fine. There's not many residential houses because actually the main buildings you see are not houses. They're agricultural buildings. They're also B2, B8 use class buildings, warehousing. So currently on the site where Ben's Yard side of the road, there's a farmhouse from there which the estate owns. And actually, well, there's 5 houses there the estate owns on there, but the rest of the buildings are warehousing and for agricultural purposes.
Any other local residences there? What about the other side of the road? Is that?
That's included in the 5 houses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alistair. One point about the landscaping. Obviously, noted in the report that the landscaping from the full planning permission hasn't yet been completed. Is it proposed as a result of these changes that there will be any changes to landscaping across the site?
Yeah, the landscaping would be completed in accordance with the approved plans from the original.
Any more questions to the applicant? No. So now we need an officer statement. No, nothing to say. And any questions that members want to ask the officers? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. It's one of my hobby horses, and it's just picking up on, fortunately, we've got somebody from Highways here. You mentioned, Highways in their comments mentioned because the queuing is on private land, then basically that's not an issue for Highways. Where I would turn that around is if somebody's been waiting possibly, especially to turn right, for some time, and they then think, okay, there's a gap, well, there isn't a gap, but they'll go, that then becomes could potentially become a Highways problem. Where the balance, I understand where you're coming from as an officer. I'll talk about the rest of it in debate, but rather than questions. But that's my concerns, is that obviously what's on private land, yes, but it then could become potentially an issue on the highways, really. Just wondered how Highways deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair summary. I think from our perspective, like the comments from our transport assessment team said, queuing in a private site obviously doesn't cause us as a highway authority an issue. Where it does potentially come an issue is where, like you say, it influences driver behaviour when they're trying to exit onto the A road and there isn't sufficient gaps there. I think the reality of the situation is that that road between Soham and Ely is extremely busy. It's probably one of our busiest roads in Cambridgeshire. It takes in excess of 19,000 vehicles a day. So trying to get in and out of any site onto that road with that level of traffic is going to cause a delay, and I think that is just a feature of the location. Obviously there isn't very much you can do about that unless you signalise the junction or you build a roundabout, but neither of those options are particularly reasonable given the scale of the development. So Yeah, there is an element, there is a concern, a risk associated with vehicles exiting in peak periods, and they've had to wait. I think the transport modelling suggests that in a peak weekend period, you know, you might be queuing up to 300 seconds to get out of that junction. And obviously, once you've got to the front of your queue, and if there's a gap that you try and get out into, that can cause road safety concerns. But I think ultimately, it is just a feature of where we are. We can't do much about the level of traffic on the A142, so it's a risk, but it's been adjudged as an acceptable risk.
Councillor Colbert.
Well, I'm just supporting Councillor Sharp's point. I'm not a highways engineer, obviously, but logic tells me that were there an island, well, not an island, a safe area in the middle of the road where vehicles exiting the site could go, having crossed one carriageway, to pause before they went into the other carriageway, rather than having to deal with both at the same time, then there wouldn't be the problem of the queuing up of traffic on the private road. I've never understood, to be quite honest, why it was designed like it is in the first place.
Is there a question there, or shall I?
Well, not really.
As an
If you can think of
observer
an
here, I
answer.
thought it was a comment that didn't really need a reply from you, and it's well aired. If there are no other...
It is a question, Chair, to James. Do we have any traffic accident information on that junction? Because I'm not aware of any accidents at that junction since 2023 when Ben's Yard opened.
Yeah, that's correct. Since the junction's gone in, I think there's been one incident recorded. I mean, the data's up to February of this year, so, you know.
So it's not what you would call an accident black spot?
No.
Thank you.
We now... You've got some nervous itch?
No, just my normal itch. It's not just...
So if you wish to speak, Councillor, do.
Thank you. No, when we visited the site, it was mentioned that about events there, and one of the events is being an overflow park and ride site. Is that mentioned? I didn't see it in the report. I think that's quite relevant. Is that right or not? I may have missed it. It's such a... Because if so, that will reduce the traffic as people go in there and they use the park and ride to get into Ely from that junction.
Well, the planning manager is looking for the right bit of typed out information. My understanding is that the Ben's Yard acts as a public service when there's a major event on at the cathedral, for example, for Christmas shopping. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine they probably had some input to the knives ferry.
Chair, it's on page 100 of the report under item 4 on page 30, Johnny, and it says using Ben's Yard as an overflow car park for park and ride events for up to 30 days.
So that answers your question.
Do you need me to come back and talk, Bill?
Pardon?
I can just clarify if you want.
If you'd like to just
thanks, Chair.
briefly clarify.
As Councillor Huff has rightly pointed out, it's contained within the conditions. We were seeking to clarify the events which have been ongoing at the site, and of which one of those has been the use of the site as the overflow car park. What we wanted to do as officers is make clear what those different events were, and we felt that was certainly one which we wanted to have in there because we felt it was clearly beneficial to both Ben's Yard and also potentially the town of Ely. We didn't really consider it, John, if I'm honest with you, with regards to highways matter, because we considered that it was just part of a normal sort of highway implications of Ben's Yard itself, and any knock-on impacts it would have with regards to Ely, as you quite rightly say, would would very much be beneficial rather than negative. So when we're looking at the planning balance, it didn't really affect our highways judgment on it. Thank you.
We're now going to move on to debate. Away you go, Councillor Velicott.
Thank you, Chair. Members, hopefully having read the list of conditions, will notice condition 21 for a travel plan, which I think is more than sufficient to address some of the highways issues that we've found here. It's important to note that obviously, although there will be a significant change of use, which I hope will bring some more traffic, there are no actual implications for the nature of the site itself, and therefore I would imagine, especially driving on that road every day, that the traffic volume on the 142 is not sufficient to overrun the place and cause a problem. But it is of course right that we have that condition in place, which is a standard condition for sustainable travel and implementation for the life of the development regardless. So I'm happy with that. In terms of the principle, I've absolutely no objections. I think it is incumbent on us to do what we can to support employment. I think everything else that's been considered with the site has been dealt with in the full permission in terms of biodiversity. I note some of the officer comments in the planning balance, but I think I have no reason to disagree with the planning balance at all. So therefore I'm happy to propose to adopt the officer recommendation as it is written.
Do you have someone to second it? That's Councillor Huff.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second. I think retail and leisure activities are some of the hardest hit in this country, but also some of the most vital. So I think anything we can do as a council to support retail and leisure in this area, we need to get behind wholeheartedly and support these people through, hopefully, a resurgence in their businesses. Thank you, Chair.
I think you're correct, and I think that there's a sort of planning balance. And do we really want to be party to sort of making a hurdle for local business when we should be taking that hurdle away if we can? Other members, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. Yes, I've got issues around highways, as I mentioned earlier, but in some ways, I think, as Councillor Velicott said, in some ways, if the traffic gets more, then it means that it's been a success. Because as I understand it from the planning today, there's a large building next that's not being built that you've got consent for a unit to go in there. So hopefully you get somebody, a tenant, or who can do that. And as has been said, you're offering a service with the park and ride. And also some of those events probably that you run couldn't be done anywhere else within Ely or the surrounds. So again, that's another activity for families and things like that to do. So yeah, without talking too much, I'm in support of this and hopefully it goes well.
Councillor Trapp.
Oh, hello. Yes, in debate, aren't we? Not questions. Yeah, I think I support this. I think the main thing here is that it is well away from other places. I mean, it is the only people that are going to be affected are the actual residents, the owners, I think. Is that right? I think it is right. And therefore, the hours here are not going to impinge on other people, which is, I think, is quite important. For something that has grown out of nothing, and I hope it does grow. And yeah, I think I'll be supporting this.
I'd like to make a comment that I would be supporting this. I think the questions about neighbouring properties is a bit. You could count on your one hand the amount of private properties that are nearby to this facility, and I don't suppose you'd even get as far as the thumb, because I'm not so sure that I believe one of the properties is the old farmhouse, and I believe that may still be in the ownership of the applicant. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's going to be much harm caused in upsetting other people's environment. I think it's worthy of note that there's been very little criticism, very little, and we can look at, I think it's 5 or 6 district councillors, and not one of those is criticised. and certainly the two county councillors for Ely haven't criticised, and I think we should do everything, and as I've heard from my colleagues, I think we should do everything we can within reason to support your endeavours. So I will be certainly voting in favour of the officer's recommendation. And have we got any more? If you haven't got any more, I'm going to go to the vote. We have Councillor Vellacott has proposed that we accept the officer's recommendations, and Councillor Huffer has seconded that. And so will all those in favour please raise their hands.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Well, we won't ask about the objections or the abstention. We have agreed to your proposal, and I'm going to close the meeting for about 2 minutes, so you can go if you want, but you We're going to start off with the officer's presentation, and we're moving on item number 6, High Street, Bottisham. So away we go. Officer.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So the application we're looking at now is for the regularisation of 56 High Street, Bottisham. So this application seeks retrospective planning permission to regularise the change of use of a former MOT testing station, car garage and workshop site from its former use, so general industrial class B2, to commercial business and service, which would come under class E. So the purpose of this application is to regularise the site-wide use as a flexible class E planning unit, rather than seeking prescriptive permission for each business or tenant currently occupying the site. This overarching approach aims to establish a comprehensive Class E site consent, thereby allowing future tenants and businesses within the same use class to change or occupy the units freely without requiring further planning permission for a change of use. So, with regards to the site location, I think most of the members managed to meet on site this morning despite the rain. So it's an existing brownfield site within the village core of Bottisham, and it's situated within the defined development envelope for Bottisham as well. So just a layout plan of the proposal. As you can see, the picture in the right-hand bottom corner, that's the frontage. It very much maintains the look of its former use as a petrol station, as a garage. There's just been some minor modifications in terms of, paint and cosmetics. But the site occupies a deep plot using the space that was already there, with the addition of a couple of extensions towards the rear. I've zoomed into a part of the proposal here which, again, members saw on site this morning. So alongside the businesses that are occupying the existing sort of workshop structure in the garage, there's an area to the rear of the site which holds some storage containers. So along with the ancillary parking at the back, the storage units or the storage containers are proposed as ancillary or extra storage for the businesses that are operating on the site. So a couple of site photographs, just in case, just to refresh your memory, or you didn't manage to make the site visit this morning. So these photos are, if you imagine standing at the front of the development, the photo on the left would be looking north along the high street, and then the photo on the right would be looking the other way, looking west along the high street. Here's a couple of photos if you were standing the opposite side of the road, looking at the development. So as I said, the development very much maintains its former look as a garage, as a workshop. The plot is not overly wide, but it's incredibly deep. I've included a couple of photos as well of the site from sort of halfway down. So if you were standing there and looking towards the high street, just so you can appreciate the depth of the plot. So the first photo would be if you were standing sort of halfway down the development looking towards the high street. You can barely see the houses on the high street. And then the photo to the right is the development as if you're standing right at the rear of the plot. So you're standing within that area of ancillary parking within the storage containers, and you're looking down towards the side of the development. And a couple of photos just for the rear boundary. You'll see why I've included these photos as I go on to talk through the various considerations. But these photos of the rear of the development, I think, are quite key, just to show the context of what's either side of the end of the development, and also that sort of rear boundary. So the main considerations with this application are the principle of development, visual and residential amenity, historic environment, highways access and movement, ecology and biodiversity, trees, flood risk, drainage, energy and sustainability, and there's also a couple of other matters that I'd just like to talk through with you. So in terms of the principle of development, the development represents a sustainable form of development because it's reusing a brownfield site within the defined development envelope. So this is in accordance with our policy growth 2. Also, looking at Policy Com 1, this allows for small-scale local or retail commercial proposals, such as this development, that meet the daily needs of rural communities within defined development boundaries. So, and furthermore, not only aligning with Policy Com 1, this proposal aligns with Policy Com 4, which supports the transition from an industrial to a community-orientated Class E use that's accessible by sustainable transport and therefore reduces local impacts. Policy EMP1 is also relevant to this application. So this, bless you, this policy aims to protect employment sites, and whilst changing from its former use as a Class B2, an industrial use, to Class E, whilst this does constitute a slight policy departure, the proposal mitigates this harm by replacing a long-term vacant garage with an active commercial use. So the redevelopment here provides local employment and environmental benefits for the adjacent residential areas. So moving on to the visual amenities, so the design and the character. So the development proposes to make very little visual amendments to the external fabric of the building. And I've put a before and after photo here because I thought that might be quite helpful to see that, you know, apart from perhaps a little bit of paint and some cosmetic work, there really isn't too much of a change in its form and in its design. Therefore, the site still has that functional character and appearance of what it was. Furthermore, looking at the separation distances to the nearest boundaries and taking into account the boundary screening, the storage containers to the rear, which are the, that's the most prominent addition of massing on the site, they can't be said to result in any significant harm on the adjoining properties. They're not overbearing, they're not impacting on privacy, and they're not causing a lack of daylight either. So the scale of the overall development has been illustrated within the submitted drawings, and it's shown to be limited and not significantly alter the way the application site is interpreted or its relationship or visual impact within the public realm. And just to sort of expand a little bit on the portion to the rear, and as I mentioned, there was a reason why I'd included quite a few photos of the rear of the site. So we've received quite a few comments from external parties and neighbours about the addition of the storage containers. So, you know, considering that, I think by virtue of their positioning towards the rear of the site, their low profile height, their colour, it can't be said that they're overly prominent or a discordant feature, certainly not within the wider street scene. And therefore, we've assessed them as not having any significant adverse effect upon the visual landscape. And I think it's important just to add that a structure being visible from private residential viewpoints or the public realm does not in itself constitute a robust or defensible reason for refusal. The critical test is whether that visibility remains in demonstrable visual harm or an unacceptable impact on local character. And I think furthermore, given the significant separation distances to the boundaries and the screening, as I said, we don't feel they're resulting in any harm on the residential amenity. Moving on to the residential amenity, as I've mentioned, the first paragraph here is about the storage containers, so I won't rehash that. But considering the operational noise and the disturbance from the development itself, so the businesses that are operating on the site at the minute, any remaining localised concerns are not considered insurmountable. So we are replacing an intensive automotive workshop here with a flexible Class E planning unit, which, you know, improves the area's compatibility with its residential surroundings. So in order for the site to continue to operate without escalating the impacts, any residual risks in terms of noise, hours of operation, hours of delivery, through consultation with our environmental health officer, we've deemed them to be able to be successfully controlled through the imposition of planning conditions. So that would relate to hours of delivery, hours of opening, things like that, and they're all included in the appendix as well. Just to address a comment that we had about sort of pollution arising or contamination arising from the site's former use, because obviously it was an industrial use. So it's considered that the sort of risks that could be there, I suppose, are going to be dealt with through separate controls anyway, so through building regulations. We've also added a condition to say that any unexpected contamination found on the site, work would need to be stopped, and they would need to follow the correct process with that. And I think that's an important point to note, because whilst this application covers a change of use and not any physical works, you know, considering the site's former use, it's something that I think is just pertinent to mention. So again, just touching on sort of summarising the residential amenity impacts. As I mentioned, the concerns that we've had, third-party concerns and neighbouring concerns, have been considered, and through detailed discussions and mutual provisioning with our environmental health officer, we're content that conditions to control operational details and protect the surrounding area can be applied in order to ensure that this development meets the required policies. Just touching on historic environment, so the site is within proximity of some nearby listed buildings. So I've pointed those out on the map, as you can see there. But I think, bearing in mind that this is sort of simply a change of use, there's no massive additional structures being put up, the impact on the historic environment is going to be very minimal. And whilst the application site is situated within the vicinity of some Grade 2 listed buildings, because of the separation distance and them not being in close proximity, we don't think that they're going to impact the setting of these heritage assets, or negatively impact. Just to cover off sort of where it sits in relation to the conservation area. So the site sits just north of the Bottisham Conservation Area. Our conservation officer hasn't raised any concerns regarding the development's impact on this or the historic environment. And again, I think because the proposal, it simply covers the change of use and no sort of physical development, you know, maintaining the building's original structure and frontage, it introduces no adverse visual changes to the historic street scene. So coming on to highways, access and movement. So the development is going to use the existing access arrangements that the garage had. So that's directly off the high street. The layout incorporates designated off-street parking bays within the existing hard-standing areas to serve staff and visitors. But in addition to that, additional parking has been introduced to the rear of the site, just in front of and behind of those storage containers. The vehicle parking spaces are considered sufficient. We also have the benefit of having James here today, so any further questions about highways parking, I may defer to James later on. But throughout the course of the application, the local highways authority raised no concerns with regard to this development. I've just pulled out a plan as well because we have had a few questions about parking on the site, and as you will have seen this morning, there's a variety of businesses operating there with hopefully lots of staff and customers coming and going. But I thought it was just important to pull out all of the parking areas of the site. So anything that's in a blue circle or a blue rectangle are the parking areas, and they go right the way across the site. So there's a considerable level of parking there. And on the right-hand side, you can see the access just coming from the high street as well. Okay. So just touching on ecology and biodiversity, because the development doesn't sort of include massive physical works, and also because the proposal is a retrospective application under the UK statutory framework, this development was legally exempt from the mandatory BNG requirements. Again, no biodiversity enhancements have been proposed within the site, but as I said, the site proposes to change the site's use as opposed to a brand new development. With regards to trees on the site, again, minimal external physical work, ensuring little impact on any root protection areas, or longevity of any arboricultural features. I did push back on our trees officer a little bit on this, just to ensure that he was happy with what he was seeing, and I think any vegetation that may have been previously removed on the site as part of any works that had gone on, especially to the rear of the site, any vegetation that was removed wasn't considered to possess significant public amenity value or have been the required size to trigger any statutory protection. I'll touch on flood risk and drainage very quickly, but the application site is within flood zone 1, so the lowest category of flooding. And again, in respect of drainage, as the development concerns a change of use of existing structures, the proposal is not expecting to alter the existing drainage dynamics of the site. No specific sustainability measures have been proposed, but I would say that as this proposal secures the retention and reuse of an existing building, this is an inherently sustainable measure in itself. And finally, just moving on to other matters. So units 2 to 5 are occupied by an existing veterinary practice, which comes under Class E. That has already received formal planning permission. So you might have seen it on site this morning. That unit doesn't form part, although it sits within the site, it doesn't form part of this application. That has already had its approval agreed and it's doing its own thing. Also, again, on site, I think it was Councillor Huffer that pointed out this morning, there's an Italian food business that is quite similar. It looks more like a takeaway. Whilst we are aware of that business operating on the site, again, that doesn't form part of this application, so we haven't considered that. That will be something that would be addressed separately. But thank you for mentioning that this morning, Councillor Huffer, because that was something I wanted to bring up. So just moving on to the planning balance, the development delivers clear economic, social, environmental benefits that align with the presumption in favour of sustainable development. So although the proposal introduces a technical conflict with the parameters of policy EMP1 due to the loss of B2 floor space, so that's the previous industrial use, and had potential baseline conflict with policy ENV2 and ENV9 regarding residential amenity and noise. We've assessed it and we believe these matters can be managed entirely and satisfactorily through robust planning conditions. The proposal demonstrates compliance with the core spatial, commercial, environmental and community protection objectives of Policy Growth 2, Policy Com 1, Policy Com 4, COM7, COM8, ENV1, ENV2, ENV9, as well as the MPPF. So consequently, the identified policy conflicts result in no material harm, and they carry limited weight that is clearly outweighed by the identified planning benefits. And as such, the application is recommended for approval, but subject to the appropriate conditions. So I'm asking members to asking members to recommend approval for this application. Again, the reuse of an existing brownfield site within a defined development envelope represents a sustainable form of development. The development safeguards local employment opportunities and enhances the delivery of accessible commercial services and community facilities in a highly sustainable location. And it doesn't sort of conflict with the vitality or the viability of designated town centres either. And also the retention of an employment asset is a sustainable outcome that aligns with our local plan. And I think that was it. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We have objectors, Patricia Dalrymple and Emma and Nick German. Would you come up to the desk, please? You've got 5 minutes between you. It's up to you how you split it up. And can you make sure that the microphone is switched on and an amber light will come on at 4 minutes. Start when you're ready.
I'm Patricia Dalrymple, and my husband and I live immediately next door to the site in question. And we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. We welcome the development of this site and the amenity that it provides. It's red. Shall I start again? I'm Patricia Dalrymple, and my husband and I live immediately next door to the site in question, and we thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. We welcome the redevelopment of this site and the amenity that it provides our village, and we appreciate all the work that has gone into preparing the various reports. However, little regard seems to have been paid to the internal antisocial noise created by the barn gym, which occupies units 7 and 8. Throughout the 40-plus years we've lived next door to this site, we have never had any reason to complain about noise. But we are now subject to the sound of loud music, bleeping machines, thumping treadmill, and instructors shouting, occurring as early as 6 a.m. and as late as 9 p.m. Unfortunately, our repeated requests to discuss this with the tenant have been ignored. We request that the committee consider conditioning the requirement for additional adequate interior soundproofing and an agreed limited music volume. We welcome the proposed reduced opening hours, but feel the unlimited 7-day opening does not in fact safeguard our residential amenity, but actually compromises our right to respect for private and family life. A return to the former weekend hours, where the work would finish at 1 p.m. on a Saturday and no working on Sunday, would at least provide us with some respite. And because of the proximity to our house, Unit 6, the takeaway, this has severely impacted us with regard to the cooking smells emitting from the recently installed chimney. We fully support the recommendation that this unit be treated individually and would hope the regulations regarding opening hours, cooking smells and noise be vigorously enforced. And finally, any conditions applied to the whole of the site will require enforcement, which, given the applicant's proven history of ignoring planning regulations, does give us cause for concern.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Nick German, and I live with my wife and children at 52 High Street, which is one of the Grade 2 listed residential properties impacted by this proposal. So we join the site being discussed. Having read through all the materials in relation to this planning application, again, we are pleased to see the full consideration of each element and of the concerns that have been raised by numerous parties. Again, I think it's important, just for the record, when we talk about the previous garage being long-term vacant, it was being fully utilised until it was sold to the developer and moved through, so it wasn't long-term vacant. We talk about intensive automotive. It wasn't intensive automotive, it was a garage that serviced a handful of cars a day. And when we talk about green space being lost, it was about allotments that were taken from the back of the site. Having said all that, and for trying to get it right, we're not opposed to there being facilities and businesses operating on the site, and we really do welcome the benefits they bring to the village. All we want to do is try and minimise the impact on our amenity. There are 15 conditions that have been recommended by the planning officer, which would definitely help reduce the impact, and we could see how this would enable monitoring and enforcement, and would give some certainty to this site, which would be a far better situation versus allowing the owner to string it out for 5 years to then gain approval, as was said to one of the tenants by the company that owns the site. There are just a few of the planning officer's recommendation conditions that we believe could be amended slightly. Condition 4, the operating hours. For 40 years, the site has not operated on Sundays or bank holidays. This sensibly restricts it, but we really do need to make sure there's 1 day a week when we could get some respite. Condition 6, amplified music, purely talks about external amplified music. We can hear music from the gym even when their doors are shut and our doors are shut, and it starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. Therefore, putting some internal restrictions on internal or external sound would help the EHO manage this more easily under a clear planning condition. Condition 8, Class E. Throughout the planning officer's report, it is stressed on a number of occasions that planning must take advice of the experts. The EHO has recommended the site class should be EG-III, and there seems to be no assessment of that, and we're not sure why they're not following the EHO's recommendations. Condition 9, and access to the site. From a safety and noise perspective, reversing, etc., we believe it would be a very simple addition to add that all vehicles should not reverse on or off the site. There is a turning circle and a space for all vehicles to drive on and off the site forwards. This would greatly improve safety on the high street, which is walked by villagers and children alike. We cannot see why it would ever be acceptable for delivery trucks to reverse on and off our high street. Finally, condition 11. While the other conditions I've mentioned are adjustments, for condition 11 I need to emphasise something that I feel has been overlooked. This is around the containers at the back. This is particularly significant to our property. Whilst these containers on their plinths are just under 3 metres in height, they are in places within...
Can I ask you, you've gone way over the time. Can you just...
Yeah, I'm very nearly done. They are within 1 metre of our boundary. What we feel is a very simple fix here is simply to lift them and move them to the back of the property where they wouldn't be along our boundary at all. There's already a pre-made plinth there, and it would always just be a simple move, and that would take away our objection to that element. If all 15 conditions are included and Class E, G3, III was agreed, we also would have no objection to this application.
We've gone way over a minute. I asked you to finish it off, not to continue.
That's my finishing bit.
Okay.
So I thank you for your time for listening to me, and I hope you've heard what I've had to say.
Okay. Thank you. Members, questions to the objectors? Away you go.
Thank you. Could you expand on the reasons why you believe condition 6 regarding the noise limitations isn't appropriate?
Yeah, as the way we read it, it says it's limiting external amplified music. So it's, for us, that reads that if they put a speaker outside, that's what is being limited. We're concerned about they have internal speakers that even with doors and windows shut, still impacts us considerably. Hence why we're looking for some sort of internal noise limit as well. Is that clear? Thank you.
More questions? Councillor Trapp?
Thank you very much. So I must have missed it because you were hurrying at the end. There's something you said something about a being no planning conditions of a resident being, sorry, a unit saying that there would be if it waited 5 years, something like that. I can't remember now what it was.
Yes, we were informed by one of the tenants of the businesses on site that the who was concerned regarding the planning application and getting planning permission stated that the owner of the site had told them, don't worry, because we will just string this out for as long as it takes until they have to give approval, which obviously gives us grave concerns as to the integrity.
Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just thinking in terms of this condition 6 about the internal music from the gym, is one way of resolving that putting a condition but there's more soundproofing within the unit? Would that resolve the problem? Obviously, then the doors would have to stay shut, but that might be a compromise that could. I don't know if we can impose that as a condition. I'll ask the officers later, but I don't know.
I'm sure it would help. When the chimney was installed in the roof of the takeaway, I could see that there was no insulation in the roof at all. And I have no idea what insulation, if any, is in the gym. Because you can hear every instruction that the instructors shout at the members quite clearly, from not only from my garden, from my house as well.
And it sounds like that, obviously knowing the previous use of those buildings, that they probably wasn't the sound, they didn't need to have that soundproofing in there, yeah.
No, that's right. And it's all single glazed.
Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you. And we now go to questions for the applicant.
Statement from the applicant.
Done?
Statement. Mr. Coward.
Oh, yes, that's it. Ian Coward, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Are you Mr. Coward?
I am, yes.
Okay, well, you've got 5 minutes and away you go.
Good afternoon. So I'm the agent, and obviously we welcome the recommendation to approve. We accept this is retrospective. The owner, there was some confusion as to the planning history. He felt it could have fallen under light industrial. It's clearly B2, that's been accepted. And of course there's benefits in terms of the B2 use ceasing and moving on. So the application's here to regularise. There's also been the benefit of some occupation, so certain things could be assessed. I'm going to pick up on a few of the issues that are raised. I don't know about this tenant comment that we'll just let it ride and get away with it. It may have been said, but it wasn't from us. You've got an application with conditions. As you know, it doesn't include the vets, which are on units 2 to 5, and we're just seeking permission for Class E across the remainder. The businesses are now getting established. It's good the members went to site this morning. And in addition to the vets, which is permitted but not yet up and running, the cafe's doing well. There's the gym we've heard about, bathroom shop, flooring shop, and the barbers. They're in the heart of the village and provide local services that were just previously not there. Of course, they bring money into the village, they provide employment, and they serve the local population. And whilst I understand the objector's position, there is some support for that position. It's a small business location, it always will be, it's always going to be small businesses, and it's also sustainable. The uses replace the garage post a period of vacancy. I think that was partly unclear as to how long it's been vacant. That was only partly controlled and partly not, and I wasn't aware of any restrictive opening hours. I just want to pick up on a couple of bits that have been raised. Residents shouldn't have to listen to noise, so it seems the issue is in relation to the gym only, and certainly no amplified music should be heard outside or certainly within the nearest residential property, and I think that's a very fair point. Clearly B2 would have created some noise, and that's now going. The bit about reversing, I'm not clear that would actually be enforceable, because obviously someone would have to be there and check how people are driving around the site. So as I say, we welcome the opportunity. It's a good thing for the village. There's a lot of conditions. They impose a level of control that there isn't currently. And I'm done early. Thank you.
Members, questions to the applicant? Lucius.
Thank you, Chair. What is your view then of the sufficiency of condition 6? I know, accept that you've accepted that residents shouldn't be listening to noise, but what's your view of the sufficiency in terms of internal and external noise based on the site as it is at the moment?
It possibly does need to be tightened up so that there's no, I think you can measure sound within a certain distance of a habitable property so that there should be no audible sound or audible music. So I think it probably needs to be tightened up.
If I may, Chair, a second question. You are aware, obviously this won't affect our determination today, you are aware that the government in the new National Planning Policy Framework will consider retrospective applications that have been done deliberately a material point.
Sorry, say that again.
So in the future, the government's changes to the National Planning Policy Framework will ensure that retrospective applications are weighed against these things. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that, should any changes be necessary in future.
Noted.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. Why has it taken so long for the planning application to go in? I think you started in somewhere about 2 years ago, I think.
The planning history of the site is quite complicated, and a view was expressed that the MOT, the testing, is actually light industrial, because it's not the heavy industry. So if it was, and that view was agreed, then the Class E already existed. There were some old conditions on the units at the back which were very specific, so that wouldn't have applied. But there was a genuine, between ourselves and your officers, looking at all the history to actually work out the planning permission was required, because at one point there was a credible argument that it wasn't until all this was unravelled and examined.
Thank you.
I believe you want to say something.
Not yet, I'll come in when...
Oh, right, okay. We will go to Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points, probably. Sorry, he's gone.
Members may wish to ask you questions.
Yeah, in terms of what we were talking about, the noise from the gym, unit condition 6, as I understand it, the applicant owns these properties and is leasing them out or renting them out to applicants?
Yes, the Billingford Holdings are the freeholders, they own everything. They're then leasing out the individual units.
Yeah, so if we decide today that we approve it, but we want more soundproofing done with the gym, then that's in the powers of the applicant, yeah.
Well, it is. Planning, of course, lies with the land. If that's a valid planning thing, and to be fair, I've accepted it is, then that's a condition that you can impose, and it's got to be adhered to.
And the other thing, it's about hours. I know one of the objectors mentioned noises starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. If we look at certainly the appendices, we're looking at an 8:30 start. So I don't know if your tenants are breaching that at the moment. I don't know what's in place at the moment, but it sounds like they are presently.
I think most of them start at 8:30. Obviously, there's no breach because there's no condition at the moment to breach. We would, to be fair, sorry, this is slightly going off the point. Yeah, so obviously there's no breach. I think they are starting at 8 o'clock. Certainly the cafe starts a bit earlier.
I'm subjected to a training regime that functions for about an hour or two every Friday morning. Now, they've managed to do it by coming and talking and saying that's the only time we're going to do it, and it's once a week, and as good neighbours, everybody's living happily. Have you made attempts, or have there been attempts by either side here, to just come to some sensible, pragmatic conclusion?
I think the short answer is no, there hasn't been.
They haven't?
That's correct.
We've had discussions with the owner of the site directly.
To be fair to the owner of the site,
Okay, we'll put the crow's nest away. Anybody? Councillor John?
Councillor Trapp, actually, I think.
If you prefer.
I prefer, yes, the form. What's happening with the containers at the moment? Are they being used or are they empty?
I think they're being used. I'm not 100% sure.
By the businesses?
I'm afraid I don't know. I think there was a possibility that someone else may be using them, but the permission that you're being asked to approve requires them to be ancillary to the businesses.
Any more questions? No, in which case, please take your seat. And we now have Parish Council, Councillor Maria Saucier.
There we go. Hi there, I'm Maria Udriste Socha, planning for Bottisham Parish Council. I am aware that this planning application is recommended to be approved. I respect that position, but I must represent the Parish Council continuing concerns and the many residents who remain deeply troubled. Let me be clear up front. Bottisham Parish Council does not oppose the businesses on that side. They have all become valued part of village life, and we recognize and appreciate their contribution. The tenant businesses have acted in good faith, likely unaware of complex planning histories. At the same time, our responsibility is protecting neighbor well-being. That's why we need individual assessment of each business and cumulative impact assessment. They also operate together, so cumulative impact affects residential tranquility in ways the single business wouldn't. Blanket Class E removes the ability to assess combinations and their combined impact. We are requesting individual assessment with specific permissions, like the veterinary practice received, to protect both businesses and the neighbors. Regarding the storage containers, paragraph 142 states, robust evidence has been received demonstrating that the storage containers are actively advertised in local village magazines for independent hire. The officer admits having robust evidence they are commercially let. Paragraph 143 then states that the application will be determined as it stands, which details containers as ancillary. We know the translation is, we know it's wrong, but we are approving anyway and will enforce later. This is backwards. Condition 12 prohibits subletting if already commercial and advertised, which the officers confirms, an immediate breach of this condition is created. I formally request deferral until the applicant confirms in writing whether these containers are ancillary or commercially let, with supporting evidence. Don't approve a description you know it's questionable. Regarding the blanket Class E, this means businesses can change without any permission. The gym can become a nursery. Lexis cafes can become an office or a medical center with no permission needed. The use classes order allows changes within Class E without permission. That's the law. Condition 7 says Class E only, but Class E includes shops, cafes, gyms, nurseries, offices. That's not restriction. You cannot write one set of conditions for all of these different businesses. They have opposite needs. They have different operating times and hours to ensure they are viable. We know that last year the vet practice got specific Class EE permission, and the officer calls that robust. Why are we taking a different approach for the rest of the site? Your own environmental health officer, too, has stated initially that Class E is far more encompassing, and he was concerned about the residential amenity. That's why the conditions are needed. But again, they are not going to allow businesses to operate as the business need. Each business needs to be assessed individually. Regarding the biodiversity, the officer is right that retrospective applications are exempt from BNG pre-commencement condition, but Environment Act anti-avoidance rule says if site is clear after February 2024, baseline must be pre-clearance state. This site was cleared in 2025, removing vegetation and allotment, replaced with hard standing and containers after BNG became law. Biodiversity laws should be compensated through Section 106, Policy EMV7, or post-commencement enhancement conditions. The officer uses none of these powers. It simply states retrospective means it's exempt and ignores environmental laws. Council has the power to require compensation. What are we requesting? If this is approved, we are requesting Class E subcategory per unit, EB Cafe, ED Gym, EA Retail, mirroring vet practice, a biodiversity compensation using pre-clearance baseline, a quarterly monitoring with evidence of what's happening on site, and enforcement commitment within 13 days that has actions and written timelines on what's going to happen. And furthermore, an annual committee review in 12 months. Paragraph 142 should trouble you, admitting robust evidence of misrepresentation, then approving anyway. We want these businesses to succeed. They become valued part of the village. But we need planning control protecting both business vitality and neighbor well-being. We request refusal or deferral for accurate information. If approving, improve the additional protection requested. Bottisham deserves planning control, not damage limitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, questions to the Parish Council? Councillor Trabb.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that you are seeking that each unit applies for its own planning permission. However, the conditions that are being sought by the planning officer seem to constrain or condition what are the neighbours and the rest of the village is subject to as a result of that. So do you think that's insufficient? Provided things like the noise, external noise as opposed to external, all that is satisfied. Does it matter whether it's an office or the cafe if those conditions are satisfied?
It does matter because the impact of the cumulative businesses on the site will have different impact on the neighbors. It will have different impact on highways. And also, yes, we have those limiting conditions, but we already know from what the site is being used right now that those limiting conditions right now, we will close some of the businesses if those are enforced. As you've heard from residents, the gym starts at 6. An early opening, a later opening hour for a gym might put that business out because they will need that early time for their public. And same for the cafe. The cafe sometimes starts at 8, obviously, and 8:30, it's okay. But the conditions, I don't think they're enough, and they will not. I will give another example. If the gym turns tomorrow into a nursery, the sound condition means nothing because there's not a gym there anymore. So that condition will mean nothing for that place.
But surely the condition will be on the noise emanating from that, regardless of whether it comes from gym instructors or little voices.
Well, I would like to see enforcing, do not make kids shout. Partially agree, partially also disagree with you, because if you open a nursery, again, if that will be the case, you will need other conditions to ensure there is safe playground, the drop-off time, and so on and so forth. And these conditions, they're not accounting for that because that's not what is on site. But with blanket class E, that change can happen. So you are not preempting anything. You're just looking at the site right now. And if tomorrow there is a change in the business, you are not going to be able to look back at the site and reassess how the business will work and what's the cumulative assessment of that business on the site and on neighboring properties.
Thank you.
Have we any more questions? No, thank you. We now have a statement from the ward councillor, Councillor Kane, which is going to be read out.
Thank you, Chair. This is from Councillor Charlotte Kane. The old garage site in Bottisham housed some small businesses that operated within the normal day, produced little noise. The main noise, which was infrequent testing of petrol motors after repair, came from the garden machinery repair shop at the end, which became units 11 and 12. The others were a garage and some very light industrial or R&D businesses. Ranks petrol station is now Unit 1, and it was open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday. It was closed on Sunday and bank holidays. It is estimated that it ceased trading about 30 years ago. It is good to see the site being used to provide local facilities and employment. However, this must not be at the loss of residential amenity to the many neighbours. So, I welcome the proposed conditions to restrict the hours, noise, smells and traffic movements of the units so they don't add significantly more disturbance to the residents next to and close to the site that was previously acceptable. I welcome the restrictions on the positioning, height and use of the storage containers. I welcome the clarity that they would need to seek planning permission should they wish to change this. I also welcome the clarity that this permission, if granted, would continue the existing takeaway business and that will follow its own enforcement planning process if it wishes to remain on the site. I'm concerned about the impact on highway, especially from deliveries using large lorries. I therefore welcome the conditions covering parking spaces and the need to keep them free from any other use in perpetuity. Allowing a blanket Class E use across the site provides flexibility for the site, but does carry risk for residential amenity, so I welcome the removal of permitted development rights so that any significant proposed changes would need prior consent. I think that the recommendation with the proposed conditions is a balanced approach to allowing the businesses to thrive and maintaining residential amenity. I think all the proposed conditions are critical to maintaining this balance. Councillor Charlotte Kane.
I must say that I've been looking after various villages for 20 years, and so far every village wants more facilities. They bemoan the closure of garages, pubs, churches, chapels, shops. Pardon?
Careful, don't go into comment. Questions to officers first.
I know. I'll just make that comment while it's on my mind. So now we've gone on to questions for officers.
No, comment from officers.
Comment for officers.
Thanks, Chair. So I've got a few points I wanted to make just as to some of the things that have been raised in no particular order, so forgive me if I do jump about a bit here. So first of all, with regard to the comments made about the blanket application for Class C, members are going to be aware of the NPPF guides us to be as flexible as possible when it comes to dealing with business and retail uses. The use classes order allows for flexibility within it, and that's deliberately designed. As officers, what we should be doing, and as members, when we are considering such matters, what we should be ideally doing when we're considering sites of this type is looking at the worst case scenarios and then looking at that and then placing conditions on as appropriate to protect residents and adjoining businesses. So with regards to that, obviously we put the condition on with regards to limiting additional physical development and for some of the permitted developments which can arise through Class E. It should be noted that whilst the previous businesses on the site, which were B2, did not operate on a Sunday, they did not have any restrictive conditions. And again, when we're looking at guidance around these things, we are able to impose further restrictions, but we should only seek to do so where absolutely necessary. Officers consider, because there are other businesses within the vicinity which do operate on a Sunday and do operate at those sorts of hours, that this is a balanced approach to controlling the sites, obviously making sure that residential amenity is protected, but also allowing businesses to operate as relatively freely as they may be. With regards to noise, I hear what's being said, and I do tend to agree with regards to condition 6. We need to be careful. So what we don't want to do is impose a condition which is purely relating to the gym, and then, for example, have a different unit change and not to have that protection there. If members are so minded, I would recommend delegating with Chair's permission, delegating to myself the ability to add an additional condition with regards to noise. So I would need to liaise with the Council's EHO with regards to wording. I'm aware of what the committee are thinking, and I'm more than happy for you to set me a mandate with regards to what you'd like me to achieve with regards to that. I realise that's unusually vague. However, it's a technical condition and we need to make sure we get it right. And I'm conscious that the Council's EHO isn't here today for me to be able to nail that down exactly. But I think, personally, I think that's a sensible and enforceable way of doing it. With regards to vehicular movement, I know there was some concerns by residents about people potentially reversing out of the site. Condition 9 is probably about as far as we can go with regards to that, because that's requiring parking, turning, and the usual sorts of tracking diagrams that we require. What we are required to do as a council is to provide the ability for people to come into the site, turn round and to traverse out in forward gear. What we can't do is we can't monitor or enforce the fact that people may choose to ignore that or do something, let's be honest, silly. But I'm confident that condition 9 gives us the control at least to be able to demonstrate that vehicles can safely go in and out of the site. With regards to the storage containers, again, I hear what the parish council is saying. However, with the application in front of you, all you are considering as elected members is for those containers to be used ancillary to the businesses. Should they have things in there that they shouldn't, that then leaves it open and also clearer for our enforcement team to be able to take appropriate enforcement action going forward. So I wouldn't get conflated by the fact that there may be a breach already on the site. If that is the case, then we will have the ability to either serve a breach of condition notice or to serve an enforcement notice as required. And again, the same thing applies for the takeaway business, as has been pointed out. Just bear with me. I think that's the notes I had. Daisy, did you have anything else that I'd missed?
Thank you. Oh, that's on, isn't it? Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the point about limiting noise, odour and smell. One of the members of the public mentioned the flue that's been installed. That doesn't form part of this application either. We've also added a condition so that in the future, going forwards, any primary cooking, frying, preparation of hot food, anything that's going to require mechanical extraction or ventilation equipment has to be submitted to us to approve. It can't just be installed. So again, we're looking to put another condition on there just so we are able to sort of monitor and control the impacts of any future, cafes or things that are going to pop up on site as well. So I just wanted to come back to you as you mentioned that. No, I think that was it. Yeah, thank you.
Members, we've got questions to officers. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if you could clarify, Daisy, what action will now be taken against or what action will be asked of the existing Italian restaurant in order to regularize the flue, the smells, and all the activities that are currently going on which are unlicensed at this stage?
You probably won't be surprised when we answer here, Councillor Huffer. Obviously, we don't normally talk about enforcement matters or cases in public because they're not generally for the public domain. All I will say is that there will be an encouragement given to, obviously, to potentially, first of all, as always, as per our local enforcement plan, the first step is always to encourage regularisation where possible. Should that not be possible, then at that point and at the appropriate time, we will then consider enforcement action in line with our local enforcement plan.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to reassure the public it's not just going to just carry on, that action will be taken.
Absolutely, and I'm not trying to dodge the subject, I just have to be very careful with what I say, so thank you.
I notice you've got your hand up. I'm talking to the parish council. I haven't given you consent to speak, and you've had the speaking opportunity, and I did make it clear that you can't, it's not just a general conversation. I will give you 2 minutes now.
Sorry, that was my only comment, that the ABC business does not fall under E-Class, so that's, I think, a different situation
Thank you. Councillor Vellacott.
Sorry, did officers want to respond to that first?
I'm not entirely sure there's a need to respond. As officers have said throughout the presentation, that use is not included as part of this application. There will be a need, should they wish to retain on that site, for them to come back with a separate application. The agent's in the room. I'm sure he's hearing what we're saying, so I'm hoping he'll report that back to them. Thank you.
Lucius again.
Thank you, Chairman. Relating to the wording of Condition 6, I think will probably help us to make a decision in the debate about whether to have a delegation or not. It can sort of be read two ways, because there should be no playback or performance of amplified music, comma, and then the others in outside areas. So are we referring to all of those possible sources of noise are not permitted only in outside areas, or are we saying that from the entire site, including inside?
My reading of that, if I'm being honest with you, is that's relating to external noise generation only. My advice would be is that we would come up with some form of condition with regards to the maximum permitted egress of noise out of a building should be at a certain decibel above baseline. The reason I'm not able to give you specifics is I'm not an EHO, I'm not an expert. I'd need to speak to Chris, our EHO, just to nail down exactly what would be an appropriate level. Because clearly you need to have an appropriate level to allow people to operate their businesses. And we could include as part of that condition details of mitigation. So for example, should it be difficult for them to achieve that within the current building, I think it's fair and reasonable to allow for the ability to submit a scheme of mitigation for those uses that might require such noise generating uses going forward. And the reason I want this to be across the whole site is, as has been referenced earlier, we could have different uses come in which create different sort of considerations. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just add one more thing to that, if that's
Well,
okay.
if you go now, and then Councillor Sharp will go off.
Fine, thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit of context about that condition, about the playback or music. So there were quite extensive discussions about the gym, and not that I frequent a gym as often as I should, or as often as perhaps Councillor Hunt does by the sound of it. They are prone to external boot camps. Sometimes, you know, people go outside, they do a little bit of training, they go for a run, then they come back to a gym. So that condition was to ensure that, you know, the activities within the gym can spill out. I think it does also apply, as David said, to other uses that could come on the site. But we very much had in mind, you know, how that could play out, and we were looking to try and protect that sort of those sort of activities, I suppose, happening from outside the site. As I said, I can't say I've experienced it because I don't go to the gym that much. But hopefully, you see where that condition has come from and the thought behind it.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I had three questions on this, and David has answered two of them, one around storage containers and the other around noise. I'm going to go back to what Daisy's just mentioned, is the gym, and really try and get... I mean, I thought this was relatively straightforward, that it could be. But if I take the gym as a specific, we've got one of the objectors saying that it opens, and I'm not disbelieving it, that it's open from 6 o'clock in the morning, which I can understand, because lots of gyms, I walk the dog at 5 o'clock, so that's my exercise rather than going to the gym. But one of the conditions we're looking at imposing is opening at 8:30. So effectively that could affect that business. But it's trying to get a balance between helping the business but equally helping residents so they're not subject to that noise and inconvenience. So if we went for a blanket E, can we, for want of a better word, tinker with a year down the line, because there's a business that needs to open at 6, and provided they've got all the noise and everything else restrictions, that will be okay. Can we tinker with those, or are we forced to go down individual applications, if you understand my question?
The simple answer to that is yes. What we can do is we can ask, for example, if a gym, for example, wanted to open at 6 o'clock in the morning, the simple route to that would be a Section 73 to vary conditions, and then we would look at it specifically for that unit. What we're doing at the moment is, and we're talking slightly broad and more technical terms, what we're doing at the moment is effectively, a bit like we looked at earlier, this is more of an outline, if that makes sense. So what we're doing is we're putting the broad parameters onto the site, we're putting the broad hours of operation onto the site, we're putting the broad noise, all of that on the site. If there are things that we need to tweak, for example, or if there's very specific company requirements, we can then consider whether or not that is appropriate on a unit-by-unit basis. What I think we've been quite careful to try and do on this when we're looking at it more in the round is to make sure that we've got sensible sort of limits across the whole of the site. Now, what we're not going to do, and I'll be honest with you, is we're not going to jump straight to enforcement, for example, on week 1, following the grant of this consent for 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning. We will allow them, if they are going to put another application in, to do so, but quickly. But the expectation will be that if they're not going to do that, then they will need to keep to that time period, if that makes sense. But to answer your question, Councillor Sharp, yes, there is the ability to tweak. Yes, there is the ability to do it for unit by unit. I just think at this stage, I think we need to be very careful. What we don't do is overcomplicate what we're looking at, but we allow ourselves that flexibility to make those tweaks as appropriate. I would probably suggest, respectfully, that I think we need to bottom out the noise before we should be extending the hours, for example, with regards to the gym. Because the way I would look at it is if we've managed to protect the noise, then the additional hours in the morning to that time in the morning is more likely to be acceptable, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the site and being there today, is there any safe egress and exit for pedestrians? You know, there doesn't seem to be a separate pathway and lighting for the darker months of the year. And that's for people who walk to work as well.
Thank you. So you mean a sort of part of the site where you come in? Yeah, people can come in. No, so I'll bring the plan up actually. Yeah, so no, it's currently as it was. The thing that has changed, so the parking. Actually, I'll go back to this photo. So on the site, you can see on the picture on the right, the cars park up against the units. Historically, when the garage was in use, the cars parked on the other side against the fence, so I guess pedestrians would walk down the middle. So there's been a slight change in how the site is used, but no formal proposals. As Ian is here today, that might be a question that Ian could answer if I'm missing anything in terms of how you've planned pedestrians to access the site, but as far as I've understood it, Ian, no, there's been no separate demarcation or anything like that. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to ask, and sorry to be throwing you a curveball, James, but if you don't mind coming in on this one.
Yeah, I don't think the site generates a level of traffic where a segregated pedestrian facility would be warranted, or it would reasonably, it'd be reasonable for us to ask for such. So, I mean, obviously it's a private site at that point. From a highway authority perspective, it's not our remit, but as a highway engineer speaking, it doesn't generate enough movement, both pedestrians and vehicles, to be overly concerned about that conflict between vehicle and pedestrian.
Just to come in on that point, I think it's fair to say it's private land. We're granting permission for this to be a business park. Whilst it's great that children are potentially using sites like that for informal play, it's certainly not something that we would generally be considering when we're looking at vehicular movements or pedestrian movements on a site of this nature. Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. For instance, condition 5, I think it's 5, yes. It says about external lighting providence. This is a retrospective planning application, so I presume this is going back to anything since it started actually operate. Since it's not what's there at the moment, it's what lighting, etc., has been installed so far has got to be subject to this approval. Is that, and other things as well? Is that correct?
My understanding is the condition that it's been putting on, which is condition 5, is any new lighting. I'm not aware of any lighting which is causing issue on the site at present, so I think that will be taken as read, that would be being approved as part of this application. John?
Right, thank you very much. Terms of reversing and parking. I noticed this morning when we were there that if you brought up the site plan, that one or the previous one, that just where that blue circle is, northeast of it, northeast boundary, there's a car there. I think there were 2 cars parked there, and I think those should be for turning, not for parking. Is that right? So no larger vehicle could actually use that reversing turning circle if cars are parked there.
Until we grant this planning permission, we don't
Right.
have conditions in place.
But the condition...
So by placing conditions on this, so looking at condition 10,
Yeah.
which outlined that the parking and turning areas located in the front of the commercial units, I think we could possibly slightly tweak that if members are minded to do so, and just say the parking and turning areas as outlined on the approved plans shall be.
Right, okay, thank you.
Can you make a note of that, please, Daisy?
In terms of noise, I noticed on page 104 of the previous application, number 18, that plant noise shall be limited to the following: 24 dB in the daytime, LAR, I don't know what LAR means, but and nighttime 43 dB. So there's already on that planning application, there was a condition on the actual noise levels for plant. And I would have thought the same thing might be applying here as well, to say there are conditions on what the noise level should be. And this is actually, and this site is actually much nearer neighbours than it is than the previous site. Page 104, number 18.
Sorry, Councillor Trapp, what are you referring to there? Which condition on, because I can't see anything
Well,
on this application.
I've got a page 104, and number 18. Plant noise shall be limited. The previous one. Yeah, I said previous.
Okay.
Yeah, but I said the previous item. We had a condition there on the level of noise from the... And I think something like that should be appropriate here as well.
Sorry, respectfully, Councillor Trapp, there's a very, very different circumstance between a site in effectively open countryside and a site in the middle of a village. The reason I asked for the condition to be delegated to myself was so that I could understand what the baseline should be and then what the level of dB over that should be. I think it would be very dangerous and disingenuous to try and apply a condition which has been designed for a different site.
No, what I'm saying...
I'm more than happy, as I alluded to earlier, I'm more than happy for a condition that would have a similar effect to be put in place, but I just think we just need to be mindful of how it operates.
I'm not saying that those levels should be applied. What I'm saying is there is a condition there saying about the external noise, which is outside. Okay?
I intend to have a brief conversation with the planning manager, and we'll just break up for 2 or 3 minutes. So we're going to break for 2 or 3 minutes. And what I will be proposing is that we accept the application, but as proposed, however, we delegate responsibility to the planning manager to make adjustments and caveats to fall in line once it's operational. It is slightly complicated in that we're dealing with a retrospective campaign at the moment. Councillor Vellacott.
Can I just clarify that? So what I'm recommending, and I'm hoping it's in line with what Bill is wanting to do, is I'm asking that should members be minded to do so, that you delegate to myself with regards to an additional condition with regards to the noise, for which I will liaise with the Environmental Health Officer to come up with a condition which effectively limits noise spill from all of the units, not just the gym. I know there's some debate around hours of operation for the gym. I'm proposing informally, well not informally, I'm proposing that we can keep the hours of operation that are contained within the officer's report for now, but for members to debate on whether or not they feel it would be appropriate that should the noise be sorted out to consider delegating to officers should an application come in and should it meet all the other requirements that we would obviously consider with regards to the operational hours of that business. I hope that's clear. I realise that was a little rambling and I apologise. Thank you.
Does that seem to be a satisfactory way through the problem? It does.
Can I clarify exactly what we're deciding? We are approving the application as the recommendation is written. We're delegating authority to the planning manager to create an additional condition relating to noise in the way you've described.
Correct.
And that's it? Or is there more?
No, that is absolutely correct.
In which case, I'm happy to second that proposal.
What I was merely suggesting that should members have concerns about us restricting the hours of the gym to discuss it, and obviously then officers can then note any future mandates when any other applications come in. That was purely my thought process. So thank you.
Okay, I was just going to say that we are in debate.
Sorry, I haven't finished my question.
May I come back with one more thing?
One more thing.
Sorry, just purely for the record, just for Patrick's benefit as well. As part of that delegation, you'll remember that I suggested a slight tweak to condition 10 around parking areas. I think just for neatness, I would ask the delegation to tweak that condition to be relating to all parking and turning areas to be kept clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Mention was made by Mr. Nick German about the separation distance of the storage containers being 1 metre from his land. Is that acceptable?
I think if we keep them to be used as storage areas for the businesses, personally, I think that there's a reasonable separation distance from where the units are to the rear or to the what we'd normally classify to be the operational areas of dwellings. As members all know, it's normally only the first couple of metres behind a dwelling where we normally seek to protect amenity. Because that's where generally people have their sitting areas. I think personally they're not large units. Members will have seen them when I went out on site today. Not really.
Yes, yes. You were speaking, Councillor. I thought you'd finished. No, if you haven't.
No, I haven't. And I think it's Maria Sakia brought up the question of post 224 about the BNG provision. Is that correct? Is Councillor Sakia correct about that? That the development after 2024 retrospective has to have some kind of BNG?
I'm going to give you some brutal honesty here, Councillor Trapp. I don't know the ins and outs, because obviously I'm not an ecologist. Well, I have a good working knowledge of the B&G regs. My understanding is that, as has been pointed out, that it is technically exempt. We consulted, as far as I'm aware, with the council's ecologist and did not get a comment back. So I can only go on what's in the report that's in front of yourself, I'm afraid.
To James, is it acceptable for long vehicles to turn in the high street to reverse up here, up to this site?
Whether it's acceptable or not, I think that's probably the wrong phrasing. It's whether it causes us a concern from a highway safety perspective. I think obviously reversing larger vehicles present a risk. It doesn't really matter where that's occurring. So that would apply to the High Street in Bottisham as much as it would apply to anywhere else. I think the size of the units and the operators that are currently there, notwithstanding that obviously they could change in the future, I wouldn't necessarily envisage a significant number of large vehicles, and obviously, you know, what you may envisage a large vehicle to be may be different to certain individuals. But I think, given the operation of the site and the size of the units, a rigid lorry is probably the largest regular visitor to the site. The condition that's been proposed to be amended is probably as far as we can go. David, you know, has already commented on the fact that we can't really restrict driver behaviour. We can make the site suitable to accommodate turning manoeuvres, to allow them to come in and out in a forward gear, but we can't police that, unfortunately. That's not the remit of planning.
Right, thank you very much.
Have we now finished this section on questions to officers? We will now move to debate, and we have a suggestion which I think is still valid.
I believe you'd need to repropose it, Bill. But apart from that, yes.
Okay, I'm proposing that we accept the officer's recommendation. It is seconded by Councillor Vellicott, but subject to conditions as now dictated by the planning manager. And they are
exactly as I outlined previously, so it's going with the officer's recommendation, apart from the addition of one condition with the aim to restrict noise from outside of the units, including the ability to ask for and require mitigation with decibel levels to be agreed between myself and the environmental health officer, and a secondary tweak to condition 10 in relation to widening that condition to cover all the parking and turning areas. Thank you, Chair.
I believe we are in debate still, and has any other members got anything to add or suggest? Yes, Councillor Vellicott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that. I think in general the site is acceptable, like everyone has said. I take a personal dim view of retrospective applications, but I understand obviously that's not something we can consider materially. I think the mitigation for noise is a sensible one. Obviously, we're never going to avoid noise in its entirety, but I think the combination of condition 6 and the additional one to be worked up by the planning manager is a good mitigation. That's certainly the strongest one. There is obviously a technical slight sort of walking the line on EMP1, but I'm confident that because of the community benefit, the second section of policy EMP1 obviously is that it is overridden by community benefit. So on the whole, I think the proposal we've eventually come up with is a sensible one, so I'm happy to support it.
So any other comments under debate? Yes.
Just very briefly, Chair, with my other hat of Chair of Licensing, several members have sat in on subcommittee hearings with me looking at licensing applications for public houses, one not so very far away from here. and they were very firm on the amount of decibel because there are lots of residents living in near the particular venue, where they were very restrictive of decibel volume coming out of the door with the door open and with the door closed. So I am reassured that our environmental health officer will be able to give a decibel level to our planning manager that will prevent any intrusion into neighbours' lives.
Can
Thank you,
I
Chair.
just ask you, have you ever been involved commercially or in your working experience with measuring decibels in an open area?
I haven't. I believe there is an instrument, but currently I believe certainly
There are instruments, yes.
that measure the decibel volume. But I used to run a pub. We used to have to keep the doors closed. We were never allowed to have the doors open. They always had to be closed, even in summer. Well, that was a long time ago. But I understand environmental health officers do actually patrol Ely on a Saturday night and will stand outside public houses and make sure that the volume is acceptable.
So what do you want me to do about it?
Chair, I'm just saying
Thank you.
that I am
That was
reassured.
part of the debate.
I was deeply concerned about it because there is nothing more irritating than listening to somebody else shouting and doing gym work and all the rest of it. But I am reassured that our planning manager, along with our environmental health team, will be able to limit the noise coming out of the gym sufficiently that it will no longer disturb the neighbours.
One would hope that two neighbours could actually get on together.
Well, that's not always possible.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with what David's proposing with the noise, because I think that's one of the key things here. And then after that, look at the hours. The only other issue we've got is the storage containers. Two things with that. One is, obviously, currently there's an accusation, shall we say, that they're being used for different to what we're proposing or what the officer is proposing on the application. So if this does go through today, then obviously there would need to be, and again, no need to comment, there would need to be some sort of time lag if they're being used for other reasons before they're actually put into use for what we're saying, which is an ancillary storage for the businesses on site, nothing else. The only other thing with the storage units, whether it's something that can be discussed with the applicant, whether they look at moving those to the back of the area where they are, which would then keep one of the residents' concerns happy, and it might actually give us more of a turning area for big vehicles because they will have moved away. Thank you.
Level of confidence in our planning department, and I'm sure that if we give them the flexibility, which I believe we may well do now, then we will get the matter resolved on an individual basis. Yes.
I know that words, Councillor Trapp, come easily to your lips, as you've had frequent practice with that. First of all, Councillor Sharp, I think it was an admission that those storage units were being used for other clients and not an accusation.
Sorry, I was through you, Chair. I was trying to be very delicate.
All right.
With my wording.
But it was an admission by the agent. I take this. I have quite a lot of sympathy with Councillor Sakia saying about individual units having their own planning application. But what I do think is that having this these blanket conditions on times, on noise, on smells, will actually mean that any businesses that come into this area, will have to conform. And I think what we ought to be doing is looking at what I think we're doing, which is I think the correct thing, is saying this is what impinges on the neighbours and the village. And if a particular business can't operate within those limits, with those conditions, then it may not be the right place to have that business. For instance, we were talking about the previous application, and the gym was mentioned. Now, that is has got opening hours from 6 till 10 6 in the morning till 10 at night, and the gym might be the best thing there. Would be a very good thing there. It may, having a gym which is, I'm not talking about, but I'm just saying, what happened there? That wasn't me, was it? Having these restrictions on what is permissible because of what it impinges on the neighbourhoods, on the neighbourhood places, I think is the right idea. I would have preferred, I think, like councillors, but I think I'll go along with the majority and accept these conditions and say, right, these are conditions. If you can operate your business within these hours, fine. Or within these noises or within these things, that's fine. Because it actually, I do.
Thank you, Councillor.
So, I mean, I do take the point by, I think, Patricia Dalrymple about it's Saturdays and Sundays now as well. So it's quite a lot of time, whereas before it was actually up to Saturday afternoon, Saturday lunchtime. I don't think I could argue that point. I don't think I'll win this point against. So I'm not going to argue that point. But I do think we ought to be looking at what happens in areas like this and what effect it has on the neighbours. And remember, last week we turned down the Aldref application. So,
respect the fact that people have had a long day and they're trying to get home, and we are giving you a fair amount of airtime.
Right.
Now, debate, any more debate? I thought we'd reached a conclusion, actually. So I'm going to risk it and say we have an application proposed by me, seconded by Councillor Bellicott, which is the acceptance with the caveats of the involvement of the planning manager. And will those in favour please raise their hands?
That's 9 votes in favour, Chair. Nine in favour. 9 votes in favour.
Okay. Will those who are in opposition please raise their hands? Those who are abstaining please raise their hand.
And that's 1 abstention.
1 abstention. Thank you very much indeed. That the matter is now resolved temporarily. I'll just let everybody move out. We now move on to item number 7, which is for planning performance, and I hand over to David to ask you questions, I suppose, is the way of saying it.
Thank you, Chair. I will be as brief as I can because I'm sure members will be delighted in that. What I'm bringing in front of you, and forgive me for this because obviously this was on the agenda for last planning committee, is the planning performance report for April 2026. For those of you that still have a paper for last committee, it is on page 245. There's no real points that I really want to bring forward on this, but as always, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. So I will pass it over to yourselves if you've got any questions that you want to raise. Thank you.
So questions. I think everybody's still functioning.
Short by last week's standard.
Is there any reason that you want to ask David any questions or make any comments? Well, if that is the case, There's nothing else to discuss, so I can then bring this meeting to a close. And thank you very much for your patience and your understanding of different members' opinions. So we're